In the beginning, before even the cosmos took shape, there was light and there was void. The light swelled across all existence in the form of a boundless prismatic sea, yet as it expanded, some of its energies faded and dimmed, leaving behind pockets of cold nothingness. From the absence of light in these areas, a new power came to be, namely the void. A dark and vampiric force driven to devour all energy, twist creation inwards to feed upon itself. It quickly grew and spread its influence, moving against the flowing waves of light. The tension between these two opposing yet inseparable energies eventually ignited a series of catastrophic explosions, birthing a whole new realm into existence. In that moment where the light and void crashed with each other, the physical universe was born. The energies released in that moment, it raced across the cosmos. It brought life to primordial worlds without number. For many, many years, this universe expanded on itself, a universe we now call the Great Dark Beyond. This is what they call the physical universe, an infinite living realm with innumerable stars, worlds, and mortal civilizations. The most unstable of the energies that released in this explosion, they came together in an astral dimension that we call the Twisted Nether. The Twisted Nether exists outside of the borders of the physical universe, yet sometimes these volatile energies, they would tear through the veil of the Great Dark, flooding into reality and warping creation. The birth of the cosmos also sent shards of light throughout reality, giving life to creatures of wondrous and terrible diversity. The most common form of life to appear were the elemental spirits, primordial beings of fire, water, earth, and air. You can find these creatures on nearly every physical world, and many of them reveled in the turmoil that came with the early ages of creation. Occasionally, clouds of fractured light, it gathered together, and it gave shape to beings of far greater power. Amongst them, the beings we know as the Naru. The Naru looked out across the immeasurable universe, and they saw a realm of limitless possibilities. They vowed to use their mastery over holy magic to spread hope and nurture life wherever they could find it. Even more extraordinary than the Naru was the creation of colossal titans. Their spirits, known as world souls, they formed deep within the fiery core of a small number of worlds. For ages, these titans slumbered, their energy suffusing the celestial bodies they inhabited. When the titans finally awoke, they did so as living worlds. Cosmic winds howled across the gigantic forms, bodies shrouded in a cloak of stardust, skin crisscrossed with silvery mountain peaks, and oceans shimmering with latent magic. With eyes that shone like brilliant stars, they observed the young cosmos and they became enraptured by its mysteries. Whereas the Naru made it their goal to safeguard life, the Titans went on a different journey. They wandered to distant corners of the Great Dark, searching for others of their kind. This grand, far-reaching voyage would one day alter the course of creation and shape the destiny of all living things. So this is how the universe came to be. Light and void clashing together, cosmic explosions, and bam! The stage is set for every story that we know of, and every story that's still to come. Now in the old origin story, they described the birth of the cosmos as unsure. Some said that it was created out of a cosmic explosion, while some believed that a single entity was responsible for its creation. Now we know how it happened, now we know that for certain it was the cosmic explosion. So moving on from the creation of the universe, let's take a look at what the Titans did. No one knows when or why the first Titan woke up, but legend holds that his name was Aman'Thul. Though Aman'Thul was alone at first, he knew in his heart that more Titans had to be out there, so he explored the world of the Great Dark Beyond. It was a lonely journey at first, but in time he discovered other emerging world souls. He nurtured these souls, woke them from their slumber, and those that he did manage to wake up, they joined him on his quest of waking up more of their kind. In time, Aman'Thul and his siblings became known as the Pantheon, with Aman'Thul being the High Father. You also had Sargeras, defender of the Pantheon, Agramar, lieutenant of the Great Sargeras, Eonar the Lifebinder, Kaskarov, shaper and forger of worlds, Norganon, keeper of celestial magics and lore, and finally Golganev, lord of the skies and roaring oceans. The Titans knew that they were incredibly powerful, so they set a code of temperance for themselves to control their power and actions towards the civilizations they encountered. We always knew that the mission of the Titans was to bring order to the universe, but that was apparently not their goal, that was just their method. Their goal was to find and awaken more of their kind by searching from planet to planet. Each world they encountered, they used techniques to check if there was a world soul present. First, they would pacify the world's raging elemental population, then they would reshape the world, and finally, they would seed it with life. In doing so, the Pantheon hoped to call forth the world soul inside and help bring it to maturity, but most of the time, they encountered planets with no world soul inside. That didn't change the Pantheon's methods though, and even the worlds without a spirit inside, they fell under their protection. To keep the planet safe and in order, the Titans empowered the primitive life forms on the planet to uphold the integrity of the ordered world, to make sure that the work was not undone. They also placed colossal machines in the surface of the world. Through these machines, the Titans could monitor what they've done, monitor these worlds, and if need be, they could purge them of life in case the evolution led them to disorder. To help the Pantheon with keeping an eye on things, as you can imagine, if you're going from planet to planet to bring order to the planets, you might not always be able to check up on the work that you've done, so Aman'Thul, he called upon a mysterious race known as the Constellar. These celestial beings observe the many worlds ordered by the Titans, keeping an eye out for any signs of instability. When necessary, the Constellar could activate a failsafe procedure to remove life from the planets in the hopes of resetting its evolutionary process. You might remember this storyline from way back when during Wrath of the Lich King. In Ulduar, we fought with a Constellar called Elgalon the Observer. Elgalon, he scanned our planet and he found it to be corrupted.
It is in the universe's best interest to re-originate this planet should my analysis find systemic corruption. Do not interfere.
The planet was apparently in need of a reset, so Elgalon was about to send a code which would activate the device in Uldum and purge the planet of all life. Thankfully, we were able to smack some sense into the celestial being, and Elgalon gave us a different reply code which not only stopped the purge, it also gave Ronin a very beautiful speech.
Citizens of Dalaran, raise your eyes to the skies and observe.
For years, the Titans explored the universe, searching for more and more of their kind, but as they went along, fewer and fewer world souls were discovered. They kept going on though, pushing on, knowing that even with the many years behind them, they'd only explored a very small corner of creation. Yet, as the Titans worked on bringing life and order to the universe, another force was also hard at work in the distant reaches of the Great Dark. From the moment that the light and void clashed together, the moment that the cosmos came to be, dark spirits within the void, known as the Void Lords, they sought to twist reality into a realm of eternal torment. They had long watched the Titans go about their business. They were envious of their power. They sought to corrupt one of these world-shaping Titans into an instrument of their will. They pushed to manifest into the physical universe. They were able to warp some of the unsuspecting denizens of creation, yet they were unable to corrupt the Titans. The Void Lords were not discouraged though. They figured that if they couldn't corrupt a fully grown Titan, then they just had to attack it in its most vulnerable state while it was still slumbering. They pooled their power together. And of course, like the Titans, the Void Lords also didn't know which planets contained a slumbering Titan soul. To cover all their bases, from the Void, they sent beings known as Old Gods to infect and corrupt as many of the worlds as they could. They hoped that at least a few of their minions would land on a planet containing a Titan spirit. The Old Gods, they contaminated mortal worlds and everything else that they touched. And although the Pantheon knew that the Void energies existed, they had no idea of the Void Lords or the Old Gods. Their attention was consumed by another dark force born from the twisting nether. Remember that this is a realm where light and void bleed together, engulfing it in constant strife. From it, the demons came, enslaved to unbridled hate and malice. They hungered for nothing less than the destruction of all life in the universe. The demons came in many forms, like two-headed void hounds, abyssals and infernals, the pit lords and the Nafrazim. They clawed their way into the physical universe, terrorizing mortal civilizations and bringing ruin to world after world. Especially the Nafrazim, they relished in infiltrating worlds, corrupting them from within, and watched as societies devolved and crumbled. The Nafrazim would then corrupt their population, twisting innocence into new and horrific breeds of demon. Now, destroying all life, it goes against the Titans' mission of bringing order and awakening more world souls and bringing life to the universe. So as the demons caught their attention, the Pantheon sent out their mightiest warrior, the noble Sargeras, to deal with them. Without hesitation, the great-hearted Titan set out and pledged that he would not rest until he had cleansed the universe of all demonic influence. For ages, Sargeras traveled to the world under attack, fighting to spare the mortal inhabitants from the invading demons. Some demons had learned how to use fell magic, but Sargeras noticed that others had the ability to wield void energies originating from the Void Lords. These Void Lords were far more powerful than even the demons were, and their presence deeply troubled Sargeras. He wondered what the powers of the Void were planning to do and what their existence could mean for the universe. Yet, despite all of that, he carried on with fighting against the demons until he noticed something strange. In his many battles, he started to encounter demons that he battled and vanquished before. After he defeated them in the physical world, their spirits simply returned to the Twisted Nether, where they could recover and return to fight another day. Killing them was only possible within the Twisted Nether or in areas of the Great Dark so saturated with that volatile realm's energies. Sargeras didn't know this yet. All he knew was that his current tactics were ineffective, so instead of doing what he'd been doing, Sargeras decided to build the demons a prison to contain them. With the aid of his fellow Titan Agramar, who was sent by the Pantheon to help Sargeras with his mission, Sargeras learned how to manipulate and shape energies from the Nether. He used this knowledge to forge a prison within the Nether known as Mardum, the Plane of Banishment. It would act as an impregnable pocket dimension from which nothing could escape. No longer would the demons be reborn after defeat. Now they would be contained within this prison, where they would languish for all eternity. Agramar and Sargeras, they fought shoulder to shoulder, a bulwark against the ravaging demonic onslaught. Although Agramar was inexperienced in battle, he proved a very quick study. Over time, he earned Sargeras' admiration, and he became the Titan warrior's trusted lieutenant. Their prison would soon overflow with demons, bringing peace to the cosmos. Demonic incursions, they would remain a constant threat to the Great Dark, but they did become increasingly rare. The Titans' worlds prospered, and life in all of its complexity flourished. With the remaining Pantheon bringing order and searching for more souls, Sargeras and Agramar held the line until the day came that Sargeras found out just how dark the Great Dark could be. To cover more ground, Sargeras and Agramar decided to split up, thinking that they could protect more worlds that way, and if the need be, they could call upon each other in times of dire need. Sargeras discovered a world infected by the old gods, and not just any world, a world with a slumbering titan inside. He heard the world soul dreaming within its core, but these were not the joyous dreams Sargeras recognized from other world souls. These were dark and horrific nightmares. The old god's tendrils had burrowed deep, enveloping the slumbering titan spirit in shadow. Some of the Nafrizim had also discovered this world, and they were chilling with the old gods on the planet, basking in their dark power. Sargeras captured these dreadlords and ruthlessly interrogated them, trying to discover what the hell was going on. The broken demon told the champion what they had learned about the old gods and the intentions of the Void Lords. If the powers of the Void were successful in corrupting a slumbering titan, it would awaken as an unspeakable dark creature. No power in creation, not even that of the Pantheon, could stand against it. In time, the warped titan would consume all matter and energy in the universe, bringing every mode of existence under the Void Lord's will. Sargeras, the undefeated champion of the Titans, in that moment he knew fear for the first time. He realized that the Void Lords, like the Pantheon, had been searching for Titans or nascent Titan spirits, each with their own plan in mind. Even worse, the realization dawned on him that this corrupted Titan could never be allowed to wake up. With sorrow in his heart, he used his blade to split the world in two. The explosion consumed the old gods and their energies, but it also killed the nascent Titan. The situation was bad, and Sargeras immediately returned to the Pantheon as he summoned Agramar to his side. He explained to his fellow Titans what exactly he had learned, what he had done to stop it, and the Pantheon was stunned. They couldn't believe that Sargeras had taken such a rash action, killing one of their kind. They thought that with their aid, they could have purged the world's soul of its corruption. Their champion tried to convince them that what he had done was necessary, but none amongst them, except for Agramar, had seen the Void or the demons. A heated argument argument followed in which Sargeras expressed his growing fear that existence itself was already flawed. An idea that he had come to terms with following his encounter with the old gods. Only by burning away all of creation could the Titans stand a chance of stopping the Void Lords. In Sargeras' mind, even a lifeless universe was better than one dominated by the Voids. Life had taken root in the cosmos once before. Perhaps, after they scoured it of its corruption, life would take root once again. His ideas horrified the Pantheon, especially Eonar the Lifebinder, reminded Sargeras that they had sworn to protect the living things whenever possible. Nothing could be so dire as to purge all life from the universe. Even Agramar, his trusted lieutenant, stood against his mentor, arguing that there must be another way to defeat the Void Lords. He tried to convince Sargeras to abandon this dark plan and reason out another solution, but it was far too late. Sargeras knew that they would never see reason, and if they would not help him expel the Void Lord's corruption, then he would do it himself. It would be the last time that the Titans of the Pantheon would see Sargeras as one of their own. Now, comparing this story to what we knew before about Sargeras and the Pantheon, we can see that the origin story has not changed a whole lot. In the past, I believe the very origin story was that the Nuff regime had corrupted Sargeras, but they retconned that storyline in order to introduce the Draenei and their origin story. It then became that the darkness of the universe slowly got to their champion, slowly got to Sargeras, and now we know that it's the Void Lords and their plans that are to blame. I personally really like it. Whereas the Titans were first set to just bring order to the universe, now we know that they were searching for more Titans. Whereas Sargeras was set to fall to the darkness of the universe, his despair and doubt that the Pantheon was unable to talk him out of, now we know that he was shaking in his boots for what would happen if the Void Lords succeed. He would rather see the universe empty of all life to be corrupted by the Void Lords, and as the Pantheon would not help him with this mission, he sought out help elsewhere from a prison created by his own hands. However, that's the story I'll save for next time, since we've been going on for long enough and we still have plenty of things to talk about. There are two things that I want to mention before we end the video. First of all, a piece of information that was given to us during the Warlock Greenfire questline. In this questline, we join Kendervad and Chewbacca as they interrogate the Doomguard and ask about his origin. The Doomguard says, "Before Sargeras freed us, we were the Titan's hounds, forever enslaved to police the use of arcane magics. Sacrificial magic was considered the greatest violation of life, and we were attuned to instantly punish those who delved into such delicious sorcery." Considering that the Chronicles describe the Titans unaware of the demons, I don't believe that this part of the lore is still canon. The demons that Sargeras and Agramar encountered were imprisoned within Mardum, and the rest of the Pantheon were not familiar with the demons or the Void Lords. That's why I say that this is no longer canon, but who knows, perhaps they can give a spin to it. Now, the second thing is a question that some of you asked me, which is, what are the Void Lords? And sadly, I don't have a clear answer. We have seen beings categorized as Void Lords before. One prime example would be Dimensius the All-Devouring. This being is responsible for the destruction of the Ethereal's homeworld called Karesh. How the Void Lord found Karesh is still hotly debated amongst the surviving Ethereals, but the effects of his coming were unmistakable. He opened countless gateways into the void and the twisted nether around the planet, bathing Karesh in arcane and dark energies. One of the mortal races hastily attempted to construct magical barriers around its city, but although the dark energies were blocked, the unimpeded flood of arcane energy tore away at the mortals' corporal shells and infused their souls with energy to transform them into Ethereals. This altered state proved to be a blessing in disguise, however, as they enhanced minds and magical abilities. It allowed the Ethereals to fight Dimensius and his limited forces to a standstill. Over the years, however, Dimensius eventually grew powerful enough to summon armies of fellow void creatures, forcing the Ethereals to flee into the twisting nether. We eventually teamed up with the Ethereals during the Burning Crusade, and we kicked the crap out of Dimensius. Now, because of that last part, I can't imagine that the Void Lords responsible for the old gods and Sargeras shaking in his boots, that these are the same as the Void Lord that was taken out by us. If I had to guess, I'd say that Dimensius is part of the power that the Void Lords were able to push into the physical worlds. They pushed to manifest into the physical universe, were able to warp some of his unsuspecting denizens of creation, yet they were unable to corrupt the Titans. That makes the most sense to me, that Dimensius and other beings that we've seen in the category of voids are just a very small, a very minor bit of power that the Void Lords possess. But keep in mind, this is just my interpretation. That's really all I wanted to add to this. Now, I'm not sure yet how I'm going to do the rest of the story. I want to talk about the ordering of Azeroth. I want to talk about Sargeras' story, but I also want to cover the upcoming Illidan novel. I'm not entirely sure yet how it's all going to be released, but you can be sure that it's coming. For now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed the story so far, and if you want to read it for yourself, if you want more details, pick up the Warcraft Chronicles, since it's really good. Subscribe if you like my videos, and until next time, guys, see ya!
See your world through my eyes, a universe so vast as to be immeasurable, incomprehensible even to your greatest minds. I have seen worlds bathed in the Maker's flames, their denizens fading without so much as a whimper. Entire planetary systems born and raised in the time that it takes your mortal hearts to beat once. Yet all throughout, my own heart devoid of emotion, of empathy. I have felt nothing. A million lives wasted. Had they all held within them your tenacity? Had they all loved life as you do? Perhaps it is your imperfection, that which grants you free will, that allows you to persevere against all cosmically calculated odds. You prevail where the Titan's own perfect creations have failed.
For many years, the Pantheon continued, searching for more of their kin, Titan souls to wake from their slumber. Yet despite their efforts, they found none. At times, the Pantheon wondered if their search was in vain, but always they pressed on, knowing deep in their hearts that more world souls did exist, and the Pantheon would be proven right. In the far corners of the Great Dark, a world took form with a Titan soul inside, a world we now call Azeroth. Upon the surface of the planet, elemental spirits walked free. You had air, fire, water and earth, yet the fifth element, the element of spirit, it had been drawn in and almost consumed entirely by the growing Titan spirits. Without this primordial force to create balance, Azeroth's elemental spirits fell into chaos, and they were led by 4 elemental lords, powerful beyond mortal comprehension. There was Alakir the Wind Lord, ruthlessly cunning, Ragnaros the Fire Lord, compulsive and brash, Pharazane the Stone Mother, reclusive and protective, and then finally, the wise Neptulon the Tide Hunter. These 4 elements waged war with each other, each in turn trying to gain dominion over Azeroth. But victory was not the main goal here. The endless cycle of chaos was what the elements enjoyed most, and for a time, the world was their playground. That is, until the arrival of the Old Gods. Sent by the Void Lords to infect and corrupt planets in the hopes of hitting the jackpot and corrupting the Titan spirits, these old gods, Sargeras, Yogg-Saron, C'Thun and N'Zoth, they slammed into Azeroth's surface, tendrils burrowing deep into the world crust towards the defenseless heart of Azeroth. Organic matter seeped from the old gods' blighted forms, giving birth to 2 distinct races. One of them was the cunning and intelligent Naraki, also known as the Faceless Ones, whereas the second race was the Akir, insectoids of incredible resilience and strength. The Naraki acted as ruthless taskmasters, putting the Akir to work to build towering citadels and temple cities around their masters' colossal bodies. The greatest of these bastions, it was built around Sargeras, the most powerful and wicked of the old gods. Before long, the Black Empire would rise and it took control over Azeroth, and of course this did not go unnoticed by the Elemental Lords. For the first time in Azeroth's history, the Elemental Lords worked together rather than against each other. Fire, wind, earth and water, it was all tossed at the minions of the old gods. The elements did incredible damage to their numbers, but it simply wasn't enough. No matter how many of the Inraki and the Akir died, more and more spawned from the old gods' form like larvae from a hive, and in the end, the elementals were enslaved by the old gods. Twilight descended upon Azeroth, and the world spiraled into an abyss of suffering and death. In the meantime, in the depths of the Great Dark Beyond, Agramar continued his mission of eradicating all signs of demonic influence. His battles took him from one world to the other until he sensed the tranquil dreams of a slumbering world soul. He made his way to this world only to discover that Sargeras had been right about the Void Lords and their plans. The planet had been infected, but Agramar believed that the world was not beyond saving. He quickly made his way back to the Pantheon and convinced them to join him in his mission of cleansing the planet. The spirit he had sensed inside the planet, it was mighty, possibly even more powerful than Sargeras, and if it was brought to maturity, it could be a great ally against the Void. On top of that, the Titan spirit was one of their own. It was family, so they had to do everything in their power to save it. For this, Agramar had a bold plan of attack. All members of the Pantheon, they would travel to Azeroth and purge the Black Empire that had claimed it. They would not take action directly, since they feared that their colossal forms and their colossal power, it would do too much damage to the planet, perhaps even kill the world soul inside. So instead, he proposed that they would create mighty constructs to do the fighting for them. Under the guidance of the great forger Kaskarov, they crafted an army of enormous servants from the very crust of Azeroth itself. Titan forged Aesir and Vanir, whereas the Aesir were made out of metal and would command the power of storms, Vanir were made out of stone and they would hold the power over Earth. To lead these Titan Forged, the members of the Pantheon also created keepers with their specific likenesses and powers. Aman'Thul gifted some of his vast abilities to High Keeper Ra and Keeper Odin. Kaskarov bestowed his mastery over the earth and forging to Keeper Arcadis. Golganev granted Keeper Thorim and Hodir dominion over the storms and skies. Eonar gave Keeper Freya command over Azeroth's flora and fauna. Norgannon lent a portion of his intellect and mastery of magic to Keepers Loken and Mimiron. And lastly, Agramar imparted his strength and courage to Keeper Tyr, who would become the greatest warrior of the Titan Forged. With this new army molded from the world's crust, the Pantheon went to war against the Black Empire. Led by the Keepers, the Titan Forged slammed into the Black Empire, and in response, the Old Gods called upon the greatest lieutenants, the enslaved Elemental Lords. The Keepers were smart enough to realize that they had to avoid fighting the unified elements, so they decided on a divide and conquer strategy. Tyr and Odin, they confronted Ragnaros the Fire Lord, their metal bodies keeping them safe from the fiery onslaught. Arcadis and Freya, they took on Pharazane, using the dominion over Earth, the flora and fauna against her. Ra, Thorim and Hodir, they fought with Alakir, using their mastery over the skies and storms, turning the Elemental Lord's own power against him. Then there was Neptulon, who was wise, and he tried to assist his fellow Elemental Lords, yet Loken and Mimiron, they used their wits to outmaneuver him at every turn. With the use of their arcane power and enchanted bonds, they were able to overcome the Lord of Water. The battles were furious, raged on for many weeks, yet in the end, the Elemental Lords were defeated. The Keepers, they knew that they could not simply slay the Elemental Lords, since they were bound to Azeroth and would simply return over time. Keeper Ra followed Sargeras' example with the demons, and he decided that instead of slaying the Elemental Lords, they should create a prison for the elements. He requested the aid of Helia, a gifted Titan Forged sorceress, and together they worked on creating 4 interlinked domains within a pocket dimension called the Elemental Plane. This would be their enchanted prison realm. Ragnaros and his minions, they were placed within the Firelands, Pharazane in Deepholm, Neptulon in the Abyssal Maw, and Alakir was placed within Skywall. With the greatest lieutenants, the Old Gods had descended them out of the way. The Keepers continued the war against the Black Empire, and the next target was the Akir. Arcadis bent the stone and soil to his will. He collapsed the Akiri burrows on top of them, and this drove the insectoids above ground. There, the Titan Forged army waited for them to slaughter them all, yet small pockets of these insectoids, even though they were too weak to mount a counterattack, they were able to escape the Keeper's wrath by burrowing further underground. The victories over the Elemental Lords and the Akir encouraged the Keepers, but they knew full well that the greatest battles were still ahead of them. They turned their attention on the temple city built around the old god Y'Shaarj. He was indeed extremely powerful, more so than the Keepers had expected. He was able to poison the mind of the Titan Forged. He drew out their fears and darkened their thoughts.
I can taste the essence of your soul. It is sweet.
The battle became so dire that the Pantheon feared that the old gods would overwhelm their servants. Despite the better judgments, Aman'Thul himself, he reached down through Azeroth's stormy skies and he ripped Y'Shaarj out of the planet. In that moment, Y'Shaarj was ripped apart, his death rattle shattered mountaintops and obliterated hundreds of the Titan forts where they stood. His tendrils had burrowed so deep within Azeroth that volatile arcane energies, the lifeblood of the nascent Titan, it erupted from the scar left behind. In this moment, the Titans understood that they could not risk killing any of the other old gods. The old gods had emptied themselves so deep within the planet that tearing them out would destroy Azeroth itself. Instead, imprisoning once again seemed to be a much better solution. The Titan Forts, they battled with the old gods, and upon defeat, Arcadus created a subterranean chamber to contain them. Mimiron created colossal machines to lock the old gods in place, while Loken would enchant each prison to neutralize the old gods' evil. N'Zoth and C'Thun fell to their might and were imprisoned, yet Y'Shaarj would not fall so easily. He unleashed the greatest of his generals, the Kefraxi, monstrous warbringers, larger and far more resilient than any other of the Naraki. They possessed great strength and intellect. Their dark power could drive even the Titan Forts to madness, and at the crack of their whip, the remaining Black Empire was sent into a frenzy. They assaulted the Titan Force on all sides, thinning their ranks, and by the time that the Keepers reached Y'Shaarj, their force had greatly diminished. They no longer had the strength or numbers to complete their mission, but Titan Keeper Odin, he was not about to give up. He summoned his waning strength, inspired them all to launch a counterattack. Loken was commanded to weave a grand illusion spell that forced the Kefraxi to see themselves and even their creator Y'Shaarj as the enemy. With the Black Empire turned upon itself, the Titan Force moved in for the kill. As they had done with C'Thun and N'Zoth, the Keepers buried Y'Shaarj beneath the earth, locking it away in an enchanted prison. For the first time in Azeroth's history, a sense of peace settled over the world, but there was still much work to be done. They might have saved the planet, but the Titan spirit inside could use all the help it could get if it was to grow and mature. Not to mention that the gigantic scar left behind when Y'Shaarj was pulled out, they had some ordering to do. To help them with their mission, the Pantheon gave artifacts to the Keepers, known as Pillars of Creation. Now their first priority was doing something about that massive wound on the planet, since they knew that the energies pouring out of it, it would sooner or later consume Azeroth. They labored day and night, they crafted magical wards around the gaping wound, until eventually the energies calmed down and settled into balance. All that remained of the scar was a gigantic lake of energy that the Keepers would call the Well of Eternity. With that immediate threat out of the way, they worked on strengthening the nascent world soul and stabilize its life force. For this, Arcadus and Mimiron, they combined their power to craft the Forge of Wills and the Forge of Origination. These two machines would work together, and together they would infuse Azeroth's spirits with cosmic energies. The Forge of Wills was placed in the northern parts of the world, and it would shape the world soul's early thoughts and perception. The Forge of Origination was placed in the southern area of Azeroth, and it would control the rhythm of the deep earth and fortify the world soul's form. With these two machines created, the Keepers continued their work, with Odin overseeing the events with the Forge of Wills. The Pantheon recognized his heroic deeds during the War of the Old Gods, so they appointed him as the Prime Designate. The duty of watching over Y'Shaarj's prison and maintaining the Forge of Wills, that would fall onto him. Now Odin and the other Keepers, they began building the great fortress of Ulduar to serve as a main bastion of the Titan forged on Azeroth. It would contain not only Y'Shaarj's prison, but also the Forge of Wills and any other machines created by the Keepers. Besides the purpose of shaping the world soul, the Forge of Wills had another use, which was to create a whole new generation of the Titan Forged. No longer just giants, now they also created the Anubisaf, the Tol'vir and the Mogu. These beings, shaped from stone and metal, they would help the Keepers bring order to the world. As the Forge of Wills under Odin's command did its fingers northward, Ra led an expedition to install the Forge of Origination in the south. With him came a bunch of the new Titanforged, and as they traveled, they found some of the remnants of Sargeras. When Aman'Thul pulled him out of the world, some of its body parts fell back onto the planet, and even that was enough to infuse the land with evil. The largest chunk that remained was the Old God's heart, and Ra figured that placing it within a container and guarding it would be the best course of action, since studying it could help them decipher the nature of the Old Gods and other creatures of the void. Ra told some of his Mogu followers to watch over the vault of Sargeras, while also taking care of the surrounding land. The expedition west carried on, and there they placed the Forge of Origination in the land. The machines were working together just as they had planned, sending healing energies through the heart of the world. A big fortress around the Forge of Origination was built by Ra and his followers, which they called Uldum, and it would become the most sovereign base of operations for the Keepers. Similar to the Forge of Wills, besides fortifying the world's soul, this machine had another purpose. In case the world would fall to corruption once again, this machine could be used to unleash incredible energies. Energies powerful enough to eradicate all life on the planet and have it start all over again. Some of the Tol'vir and the Anubisaf, they were left behind to safeguard Uldum, while the rest of the party they marched northwest into the lands called Silithus, home to C'Thun's prison. Ra and his allies, they worked on expanding this prison, building another mighty fortress, and this one they called Ankh-Kiraj. With the task complete, High Keeper Ra ordered the remaining Titanforged to stay behind and guard the strongholds. He himself roamed the southern regions of Azeroth, observing his Titanforged from a distance and making sure that they performed their duties. With their machines placed upon the planet, the next job the Keepers had was reshaping the land. For this, they had their new generation of servants created from the Forge of Wills, each of them having their own job to perform. There were the Irvan, specialized in crafting mountains and carving out the deep places of the world. The Mechanomes, designed by Keeper Mimiron, charged with building and maintaining the Keeper's machineries. The Mogu, to dig out the rivers and waterways of Azeroth. Stone and sea giants to shape the environment, and to guard all of it, they had two different groups of constructs, the Vrykul and the Tol'vir. These creations would walk over the land of Azeroth and shape it to their image. But where there is a world, there is a need for life. This duty fell upon Keeper Freya, and in order to bring about life, she crafted, or she tapped into, a realm called the Emerald Dream. Spirits and strange otherworldly beings populated the dream, a surreal paradise, a mirror image of Azeroth. With that realm created, or that link established, Freya wandered the world, searching for locations where the Well of Eternity's energies had come together. She had found that these locations created the perfect conditions to develop new flora and fauna, places like Unguro Crater, Sholazar Basin, and the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. She experimented and molded life of astounding diversity, and she seeded it all around the world. The greatest creatures to come out of these areas were the colossal animals, known in the past as the demigods, and now we call them wild gods. Freya loved and adored these wild gods as if they were her own children. They often wandered the land together, forests and grasslands blooming in their footsteps, yet there was one place that she and the wild gods visited more than any other. A massive forested peak called Mount Hyjal. It was on the slopes of Hyjal that Freya bound the spirits of her beloved wild gods to the Emerald Dream. Now you might remember seeing a few of them in the past, like Aviana, Ursak and Goldrin. Those are a few examples of the wild gods. As they continued their journey, they found life forms not directly created by Freya or the other keepers. When they banished Azeroth's elementals to the elemental plane, some had escaped the banishment and they evolved into something new creatures of flesh and blood. A prime example of these were the proto-dragons, which means that not all life on Azeroth was shaped by the Keeper's hands. Over time, the Keepers and their servants, they were able to form, shape, stabilize and create Azeroth's mainland mass, a continent full of plants and creatures of every kind. Twilight fell as the Titanforged surveyed the world that they had shaped, and they named the primary continent Kalimdor, Land of Eternal Starlight. The Titans were very happy with the Keeper's work, and they knew that the slumbering world soul was in good hands. It was time to travel back into the Great Dark to search for more of their kind, but the discovery of Azeroth, it had shown them that there could be more of them out there. The Keepers left behind were sad that their creators had to go, yet they were also filled with pride at being given the honor of safeguarding Azeroth. Loken and Mimiron, they crafted a set of enchanted artifacts called the Discs of Norgannon, which would be used to keep a record of the history unfolding on Azeroth. Should the Pantheon ever return to the planet, then they would know what happened in their absence. As a final act, before leaving Azeroth behind, Aman'Thul recruited Elgalan the Observer to serve as the world's celestial guardian. He would keep an eye on things, make sure that the planet would not fall to corruption once again, and if there was the need, he could activate a protocol, turning the Fort of Origination into a weapon, which would then purge the world of all life and corruption. The Titans had done everything possible to heal Azeroth and bring the world's soul to be. All that remained now was to wait and hope that the world's soul would one day awaken. They said their final farewells, went about their journey, and this would be the last time that the Keepers would see their creators. But that's a story for another day, since I've been going on for long enough. As a final note, if we compare this storyline to the previously established story, then we can see that a lot of things in the past credited to the Titans, they were actually done in order of the Titans by their Titan Keepers and the Titan Forged. We finally know how and why the Well of Eternity came to be, and an interesting change is that instead of the entire land being called Kalimdor, now they said that the primary continent was named Kalimdor. Does that mean that there was another continent, maybe multiple? Is there still another side of Azeroth that we need to explore? Maybe, but only time will tell. For now, we've reached the end of the video. Next week, I want to talk about the events that took place once the Titans left Azeroth behind, left their Keepers to do its thing. Some familiar with the old lore, you might have already picked up on Odin being assigned as the Prime Designate. Yes, the story told during Wrath of the Lich King, it told us that Loken was the Prime Designate. Bringing order to the planets and waging war with the old gods, it had taken quite a bit out of the Keepers, and they became indifferent to the world, focused on maintaining their vaults and machines. The world didn't stand still though, and a massive threat in the form of a mutated proto-drake called Galagrond appeared. Titan Keeper Tyr did not follow his siblings' example, and he actively worked on saving the world from this threat, eventually recruiting the aid of 5 of the greatest and most intelligent proto-dragons in existence. Together with these 5, Tyr battled with Galagrond, losing one of his hands in the process, but they were eventually able to bring Galagrond down. Seeing how his fellow Keepers were acting, and how these 5 had worked together to save the world, Tyr convinced his fellow Titan Keepers to imbue the proto-dragons with some of their power, and have them help with safeguarding Azeroth. The other Keepers, they were ashamed of their actions, and they agreed with Tyr. All of them, except for Odin, who thought that this was a bad idea. He saw Alexstrasza and the other proto-dragons as primitive life forms, and only the mighty Titan Forge could be trusted with protecting the world. He claimed that as Prime Designate, he should be the one to decide how to proceed, but the other Keepers didn't listen. Even High Keeper Ra had traveled from the distant south to take part in the great ceremony, and they all agreed with Tyr. The Keepers bestowed the blessing of the Titans upon these 5 proto-dragons, turning them into the dragon aspects. Freya called upon her creator Eonar to empower Alexstrasza, turning her into the Lifebinder and giving her stewardship of the living world. She had proven her courage and compassion in the battle against Galagrond, so she was crowned the Dragon Queen and given command over her kind. Freya also asked Eonar to bless Ysera, Alexstrasza's younger sister, with nature's influence. She was charged with keeping watch over the flowering wilds of Azeroth from within the Emerald Dream. Bound to this realm, she descended into an endless trance, and she became known as the Dreamer. High Keeper Ra called upon Aman'Thul to bless Nosdormu with the mastery over time. From this moment forth, he would be known as the Timeless One, and then Keeper Loken, he called upon Norgannon to bless Malygos with incredible arcane powers. He would be known as the Spellweaver, with the limitless realms of magic and hidden arcana to be shared, explored, and protected. Finally, Keeper Arcadis called upon Kaskarov to bless Neltharion with some of his vast powers. Now known as the Earth Warder, Neltharion was given charge over the mountains and deep caverns of the earth. He embodied the strength of the world. With these 5 turned into the first of the dragons, the Keepers then magically changed hundreds of the proto-dragon eggs, making sure that there would be plenty of their kind to grow and reproduce. Each flight, each color would serve a different dragon aspect, but all of them were bound to the same goal, which was to protect Azeroth. To strengthen this bond, the Keepers forged Wormrest Temple, a big tower which would serve as the heart of the dragon's culture, a sanctuary where they could gather and discuss their activities, a symbol of their unity. Satisfied with their work and with these new guardians created, the Keepers disappeared back into the lairs, leaving the aspects to watch over the living creatures of Azeroth. Odin was not happy though. He was pissed that the other keepers had refused to listen to him, and he believed that the dragon aspects would fail in their duty of safeguarding the world. No, he could not trust the fate of the planet to such a primitive life form. He would create an elite army of his own design to protect the world should the need ever arise. He was not against the keepers. He welcomed them to join him, but the keepers, they saw it as a foolish plan, and they demanded Odin to stop. His mind was made up though, and if the other keepers would not join him, then Odin would pursue his quest without them. With the aid of the Titan-forged sorceress Helya, which Odin, over the ages he began to see her as his adopted daughter, they lifted part of Ulduar into the sky and they called it the Halls of Valor. From his new domain, Odin proclaimed to the Vrykul down below that any who would prove themselves worthy, those who would die a glorious death in battle, would live again in the Halls of Valor. Their spirits would be taken to the fortress and given mighty Stormforged bodies to become Valarjar, Azeroth's foremost guardians. The only thing Odin had to do was find some way to transport these spirits from death, and for this knowledge, he studied the energies of the Shadowlands. This realm in the Chronicles is described as being similar to the Emerald Dream, a link to the world of Azeroth. Yet whereas the Emerald Dream represents life, the Shadowlands represent death. They are the nightmarish realms of decay, teeming with the souls of the dead who were passed on from the world of the living. The origins of the Shadowlands remain uncertain, but they have existed ever since mortal life first arose in the physical universe. Many believe that mortal souls are drawn into this dark place at the point of death, where they then remain forever after. Still others, they hope that their souls will go on to a brighter place rather than languish for eternity within the cold confines of the Shadowlands. By studying this realm, Odin somehow found his way of transporting spirits back to his Halls of Valor. But to do this, someone would have to volunteer and become a Valkyr, cursed to live as a phantom being guiding the souls between the Shadowlands and the physical world. None of the Vrykul stepped up to take this job, so Odin decided that he was going to enforce the job on some poor soul, which Helya did not agree with. They ended up in a heated argument, with Helya trying to convince Odin to turn away from this mad plan of turning the Titanforged into slaves. It grew so heated that the two of them nearly came to blows, but in the end, Helya warned Odin that she would return the Halls of Valor to Ulduar if Odin did not change his mind. With that, Odin had found his victim. He saw Helya as a threat, not only to his plans, but to the very safety of Azeroth, so he struck out. He shattered her physical form, and he twisted her spirit into the first of the Valkyr. Helya screamed, a tormented cry which could be heard all the way into Shadowlands, but this violent transformation was just the start. She loathed Odin for what he had done to her, but she also found herself unable to disobey his orders. As he commanded, Helya went out to transform more unwilling Vrykul into the cursed Valkyr, and for ages she and those unfortunate enough to join her, they were the ones who brought the souls of heroic Vrykul to the Halls of Valor, where Odin, he then trained and empowered each of them. He had no remorse for breaking from the Keepers or for transforming Helya into the first Valkyr. In his mind, everything that he had done was for the safety of Azeroth and in honor of the great Pantheon. However, Odin would soon regret the choices he had made. As all of this was going on, the Keepers went about their duties, but in the Great Dark, Sargeras was meditating on the fate of the universe. Doubt and despair twisted his every thought, and he became more and more certain that creation itself was flawed. The only way to spare the universe of the Void Lords was to purge it in fire, and so his grand burning crusade began. the fallen titan traveled to his prison world of Mardoom, and he released the demons that he had imprisoned. The explosion of shattering the plane of banishment, it engulfed him with fell magic, transforming this once noble form and searing his very soul. His mind was still hell-bent on that one mission, prevent the Void Lords from possessing creation, and by shattering the prison, Sargeras had ruptured the boundaries between the Great Dark and the Twisting Nether. A monstrous celestial maw, a storm of emerald fire, it had ripped through the fabric of reality. It would remain a scarred creation, smoldering proof of Sargeras' madness for all eternity. Now Sargeras, he had managed to learn more about the nature of demons, including how to permanently kill them. So he offered those demons out of the prison, he offered them a choice. They could either join him in his burning legion, or they could be destroyed. This made the choice very easy. The demons gladly teamed up with their new leader, and Sargeras empowered them further. The Burning Legion went about their mission of destroying creation until Agramar arrived, and he witnessed his former friend and mentor leading the demons. He demanded an explanation of Sargeras. What was he thinking? Yet Sargeras offered none. The two greatest warriors the universe had ever known, they went at each other, but Agramar was at a disadvantage. Like all titans, he was susceptible to fell magic, and Sargeras was able to send him reeling in agony. Gathering all of his remaining might, Agramar struck out once more. Their blaze met, igniting a furious explosion of fell and arcane power. Both weapons had been shattered in that moment, and Agramar was heavily wounded by the blast. He was forced to retreat, only to gather the rest of the Pantheon, and together they tried to make Sargeras see reason. They informed him about this planet they had found, Azeroth, a titan spirit inside, so strong that surely with that spirit they could fight and stand up against the Void Lords together. Sargeras listened closely to the words, but he was unmoved. Nothing they could say could ever change his mind. And with a howl of rage and sorrow, Sargeras struck Agramar down, his ruined fell blade nearly cleaving the Titan in two. Outraged by this murder, the Pantheon unleashed their phenomenal cosmic powers. They battled with Sargeras and the Legion. Stars withered and died as the battle raged across the cosmos, scarring vast stretches of reality. In the end, it was Sargeras with his fell-fueled might that had the upper hand. But before he could strike the Pantheon down, Norgannon used his powers to bend the energies of the universe to his will. He was able to protect their spirits and launch them into the Great Dark, but Sargeras thought that he had won the battle and destroyed his former brothers and sister. He had also gained valuable information about a little planet called Azeroth with a titan spirit inside. He didn't know where the planet was, but he was sure that in time he would find it and destroy it before we become corrupted by the Void Lords, just as he would with the rest of the universe. The spirits of the Titans flew across the Great Dark, making their way to Azeroth and find a safe haven within the bodies of their Titan keepers. As they entered them, the keepers felt a surge of power and experienced memories of events that they had never witnessed. The Chronicles doesn't describe for all of them which spirits enter which keeper, but it's possible that those empowered by a specific keeper, they gained a piece of their spirit. Nonetheless, confused by these events, the keepers called out to their creators, but the only response was silence. This troubled them, and they sank into a long period of confusion and unease. The old god Yogg-Saron, still imprisoned within Ulduar, he sensed the emotions going through the keepers, and he tried to take full use of this opportunity. Keeper Loken was his target, as the whispers of the old god tried to corrupt his mind. Despite being in turmoil by these events, Loken was still able to resist the corruption, yet an opportunity for Yogg-Saron would soon present itself. As Loken fell further into despair, he often sought comfort with a Vrykul named Sif, the mate of his brother, Keeper Thorim. Out of their meetings, a secret and forbidden love grew, a love that Yogg-Saron played upon, twisted it into a dangerous obsession. Loken became more and more compulsive, pushing Sif to openly professing their love for each other, but Sif was not having any of it. She knew that if Thorim discovered their affair, the unity of the keepers would be shattered. She broke all ties with Loken, demanding that he left her in peace. But the thought of losing his beloved Sif, it drove Loken to madness. In anger and jealousy, he lashed out at his beloved, and in that moment, he killed her. Guilt took hold of the Titan Keeper, and yet he couldn't tell Thorim what he had done. He scrambled for a way to cover up Sif's death, and in that moment her spirits appeared before him. To his surprise, she actually forgave him for his actions and told him that Thorim could never learn the truth of what he had done. The Titan Forge would descend into a civil war, and every pledge he had ever made to the Pantheon would be broken. Instead, Sif instructed him to take her body into the Storm Peaks and blame her death upon Arngrim, king of the Ice Giants. Loken noticed how devious Sif's spirit was. He felt the darkness in her spirit, but his fear clouded his judgment, and he pushed it out his way as he informed Thorim of what the king of the Ice Giants had done. In his grief, Thorim unleashed his fury and struck down Arngrim and many of his followers. This ignited a war between the Storm and the Ice Giants, a war Loken scolded Thorim for. Sif herself would look upon Thorim in shame. If only she could have seen what he had done. A deep depression came over Loken's brother, and Thorim left Ulduar behind to languish in solitude. Loken himself kept listening to the image of Sif, who convinced him to build an army of his own using the Forge of Wills. What Loken perhaps sensed, but didn't want to acknowledge, was that the image of Sif that was talking to him, that was instructing him, it was actually Yogg-Saron manipulating the events. He wanted Loken to use the Forge of Wills, which the old god had tainted with the Curse of Flesh. A curse which over time would literally give this newly shaped Titan Forge flesh and make them more vulnerable to the old god's corruption. Not only would this curse be placed upon the new, created generation, they in turn would spread it to the already formed Titan Forged. Too late did Loken fully recognize what this spirit of Sif actually was. He observed how his army of warriors were infected with darkness, but it was too late to back down now. Fear still gripped his heart. Fear that the Pantheon or Elgalon would come down and realize what he had done. Fear had made him Yogg-Saron's pawn, and this discovery shattered the last remaining bits of Loken's once noble heart, and he became obsessed with keeping his wrongdoings a secret, and he embraced the powers of the old god. With such a might at his command, he knew that he could defeat the remaining keepers and destroy all evidence of his wrongdoing. He sent out the army he had created to first overwhelm any of the remaining giants, and he ended the conflict between the Storm Giants and the Ice Giants. All those that still resisted, they were placed into stasis chambers. After this, Odin and his mighty army of Valajar, they became the prime target. Helia was the key to obtaining victory in that war, as Loken made her a deal. He would set her free from Odin's control, and in return, she would lock Odin and all those that followed him away within the halls of Valor. Still enraged by what Odin had done to her, Helia gladly accepted the deal, as she used her magic in a similar way she had done when she had helped create the elemental plane. Odin and his mighty Valajar struggled desperately to escape the floating citadel, but not even their might was enough to break the barrier, and for years they would be imprisoned within the halls of Valor. Helia herself was now free from her life of servitude, and she decided to forge a new home for herself and the other Valkyr. Far below the halls of Valor, she created the domain called Helheim, bound to Azeroth's great seas, which would act as a final destination for many of the Vrykul spirits after death. Yet the darkness that had made their home in Helia's heart transformed her created realm into a place of nightmare and shadow. The souls of the dead Vrykul who arrived in Helheim, they found themselves turned into vengeful beings called Gavaldir. They became one with the ocean mist, raiding and plundering the shores of Kalimdor for all eternity. Now, not all of the Valkyr stayed with Helia after Odin's defeat. Some of them disappeared into the Shadowlands, while a few of them, who still had a glimmer of nobility in their souls, they dedicated themselves to watching over the physical world. From within the Shadowlands, these Valkyr would at times guide the dead back to the land of the living. With Odin taken care of, Loken believed that he bought himself enough time to work on his plans to bring the other keepers down, but Keeper Mimiron, he'd already noticed that there was something wrong with the new Titan Forge, and he thought that the blame could be found within the Forge of Wills. Loken acted quickly. He sabotaged the Keeper's workshop in an attempt to kill him, while making it look like an accident. But Mimiron, he survived this little accident, and his faithful mechanomes, they discovered their master spirits. They built him a giant mechanized body to hold the Keeper's soul, and although Mimiron had survived this murder attempt, his mind would never be the same. He secluded himself, forever working on his clockwork inventions.
Gaze upon its magnificence! Bask in its glorious... glory!
Mimiron's fate would surely raise suspicion amongst the other keepers, so Loken knew he had to move fast. Freya was up first, and his army confronted her at the Temple of Life. Freya and Loken, they battled with each other. Their followers did the same, yet she was no match for Loken and the shadowy powers backing him up. Yggdrasil himself enthralled Freya's spirit, compelling her to withdraw into the halls of Ulduar and spend her days tending to her garden. As Loken battled with Freya, Thorim was confronted by two fire giants named Ignis and Vulcan at the Temple of Winter. Their blistering inferno sapped Hodyr's wintry strength and decimated his icy followers. Loken later arrived to subdue Hodyr directly, and Yggdrasil also took control of his mind, forcing this keeper to retreat into a frigid chamber within Ulduar. This meant that there were two keepers unaccounted for in the north, Tyr and Arcadis, and these two had managed to not fall for Loken's schemes. Tyr had long suspected that there was a darkness growing within the fallen keeper, a suspicion that was now confirmed when he witnessed Loken's attack on Hodyr. Knowing that Loken had fallen to the dark side was one thing, but Tyr was in no position to directly take action. There were many of Loken's troops around Storm Peaks and the halls of Ulduar. Now knowing that he stood little chance against this army, Tyr took Arcadis and their close friends Iron Ea, a Titan Force giantess, to the outskirts of the Storm Peaks. There they watched and made plans as Loken dispatched his forces to hunt for Tyr and his companions, yet his forces came up empty-handed. Loken believed that Tyr and his allies, they must have fled the region, so instead he turned his attention back to Ulduar, where he claimed his dominion. He altered the machines within the fortress, used them to appoint himself as the new prime designate of Azeroth. He also disabled the tainted Forge of Wills, and he banished many of his servants into the Storm Peaks. Ulduar was sealed off from the world as Loken languished in regret within Ulduar's silent halls. Despite everything he had done, everything that he had accomplished, he still feared that the Pantheon or Algalon would discover his crimes and punish him. In truth though, the greatest fear that Loken should have had was the threat directly beneath his feet. No longer under the watchful eyes of Ulduar's jailers, Yggdrasil began to stir, working to free itself from its impregnable prison. And that is where we'll end the story for today. Next week, we'll continue on and talk about the plans of Tyr, Arcadis, Iron Aya, but also Keeper Ra, who, as most of you that paid attention during Mr. Pandaria, he had his own problems to deal with. All of that is going to be for next week. The Chronicles has brought so much lore to talk about, it's amazing, and for those that haven't picked it up yet, I can highly recommend it. Now from this information, as a final note, we can see that a major difference in the lore is made when it comes to the blessing of the aspects. In the past, we've had these beautiful speeches given by the Pantheon themselves, and it seems like they've changed it, and now it's actually the Titan Keepers that are responsible for the aspects and their power. I'd still like to believe that the Pantheon helped out with this blessing, their keepers calling out to their creators and giving their little speech. Especially because after this moment you read about how Sargeras struck down the Pantheon, and when the keepers tried to reach out to their creators, all they got was silence. I would like to believe that the speeches are still canon, but I'm not 100% certain. Next to this, we can also see that Loken's story is pretty tragic. A forbidden love pushed to obsession by Yggdrasil. He walked deeper and deeper into darkness, he tried to cover up for his mistakes, and by doing so, he set things in motion which allowed Yggdrasil to become a massive threat again.
System online. Lifeform pattern recognized. Welcome, Brandbronson. Query?
Query? What do you think I'm here for? Tea and biscuits? Spill the beans already.
Tell me how the dwarves came to be. And start at the beginning.
Accessing prehistoric data. Retrieved. In the beginning, earthen were created.
Right. I know the earthen were made from stone to shape the deep regions of the world. But what about the anomalies? Matrix non-stabilizing and whatnot.
Accessing. In the early stages of its development cycle, Azeroth suffered infection by parasitic, necrophotic symbiotes.
Necro one, speak bloody common, will ya?
Designation. Old Gods. Old Gods rendered all systems, including earthen, defenseless in order to facilitate assimilation. This matrix destabilization has been termed the curse of flesh. Effects of destabilization increased over time.
Old gods, huh? So they zap the earthen with this curse of flesh, and then what?
Accessing. Creators arrived to extirpate symbiotic infection. Assessment revealed that Old God infestation had grown malignant. Excising parasites would result in loss of host.
If they killed the old gods, Azeroth would have been destroyed.
Correct. Creators neutralized parasitic threat and contained it within the host. Forge of Wills and other systems were instituted to create new earthen. Safeguards were implemented, and protectors were appointed.
What protectors?
Designations, Aesir and Vanir, or, in common nomenclature, Storm and Earth Giants. Sentinel Loken, designated Supreme. Dragon aspects appointed to monitor evolution of Azeroth.
Aesir and Vanir. Okay, so the Forge of Will started making new earthen. But what happened to the old ones?
Additional background is relevant to your query. Following global combat between Aesir and Vanir.
Hold everything. The Aesir and the Vanir went to war? Why?
Unknown. Data suggests that impetus for global combat originated with Prime Designate Loken, who neutralized all remaining Aesir and Vanir, effecting termination of conflict. Prime Designate Loken then initiated stasis of several seed races, including Earthen, Giants, and Vrykul, at designated holding facilities.
This Loken sounds like a nasty character. Glad we don't have to worry about the likes of him anymore. So if I'm understanding you right, the original Earthen eventually woke up from this stasis, and by that time, the whatever had turned them into proper dwarves. Or at least, dwarf ancestors.
Essentially, that is correct.
Well, now, that's a lot to digest. I'm gonna need some time to take this in. Thank you.
Acknowledged, Brand Bronzen. Session terminated.
As Loken dealt with the other Titan Keepers, he was expected Keeper Ra to show up and investigate what was going on in Ulduar, but the Keeper himself never showed up. Curious, Loken sent out some of his forces to travel to Uldum and investigate what Ra was up to, but not even Ra's followers could inform them about their master's actions. It seemed like Ra had simply disappeared, but sending out his corrupted forces would have major consequences. They spread the curse of flesh amongst Ra followers in the south, beginning the transformation and weakening their defenses against the old god's corruption. What none of them knew was when Ra felt the spirit of Aman'Thul enter his body, he didn't just shrug it off and forget about it. He realized that something terrible had happened. The Pantheon had fallen, yet he didn't want to believe it. Using his magic, he extracted the remaining part of Aman'Thul's lingering power, and he placed it within a mountain vault near what would be known as the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. He hoped to preserve this small piece of what was left of his creator, while Ra himself spent his time in the catacombs beneath the land, meditating on what he had learned. With their High Keeper gone, Ra's forces developed their own cultures and habits. The Tol'vir remained in Uldum, the Anubisaf continued watching over the prison of Kafun, while the Mogu remained in the east, guarding the Titan Forge vaults and machines. Now back in the north, ages passed and the Titan Forge that were exiled out of Ulduar by Loken, they spread out across northern Kalimdor. The Giants, they went into the mountains and seas, they disappeared from sight. The Earthen, they went underground, while the Vrykul, they stayed above ground and they made their small clans. A peace existed between the groups of Titan Forge, but a peace that wouldn't last. Vulcan and Ignis, they saw the Storm Peaks as a land ready for conquest, and they recruited a Vrykul clan called the Winterscorn to fight with them. With enchanted armor and powerful forged weapons, they prepared to lay war upon the land. Yet the curse of flesh didn't sit still, and the Vrykul started to show the first symptoms in the form of their metallic skin becoming brittle and weak. Despite this setback, Vulcan and Ignis had no intention of giving up on their campaign, so they used their power to forge powerful iron constructs and molten golems. With these forces, they went to war. They stormed the underground lairs of the Irvan, who had not seen this attack coming, and they were massacred. A small group managed to flee and seek aid from Tyr, Arcadis and Iron-Aya, who had been able to avoid Loken's wrath and his troops. Outraged, these three gladly joined the Irvan, with Tyr fighting back on the front line, while Arcadis and Iron-Aya, they worked on building their defenses. Their retaliation worked for a while, until Vulcan and Ignis decided to make enchanted snares and enslaved the local proto-dragons to fight with them. The Winterscorn's brutal attack forced the Irvan to scatter, and even Tyr and his companions were forced to flee. They knew that they needed aid, so Tyr called upon the 5 dragon aspects to join them in this war, and upon seeing so many destroyed Titanforged and the enslavement of the proto-dragons, the 5 aspects banded together and unleashed their might against the Winterscorn. Their blessings, their powers were able to hold the army off, while Nosdormu and Ysera, they worked together on a spell that enveloped the enemy forces in a mist, which placed them in a deep sleep. This allowed them to lock them away within the tomb cities across northern Kalimdor, where they would remain slumbering while the curse of flesh ate away at them. When the Winterscorn Vrykul finally woke up again, many years later, they discovered that they had completely degenerated into mortal creatures of flesh and blood. With the Winterscorn defeated, Tyr realized that the time of hiding was over, and they had to take action against Loken. Otherwise, more conflicts like this would arise, and the Titanforge would remain divided. Taking down Loken would take planning and intel, so they decided that the first step in their plan was to get their hands on the discs of Norgannon. These discs had been able to record the history of Azeroth, including Loken's schemes, and with this knowledge, they'd be able to devise a plan and take action. At the gates of Ulduar, Tyr called out to Loken to hand over control of Ulduar, or there would be dire consequences. Loken assured Tyr that such drastic measures would not be needed, and as the two keepers argued with each other, Arcadis and Iron-Aya infiltrated Ulduar and stole the discs. With their prize claimed, they knew that they had to get out of the area, so after allowing a few of Loken's exiled forces to join them, mainly Irvan, Vrykul and Mechanomes, their party quickly traveled south as Loken discovered what they had done. Fear once again took hold of the corrupted keeper. With these discs, the truth of his actions, Tyr and his allies, they will be able to turn the Pantheon or Elgalon against him. They had to be stopped, and the only force that Loken could think of to do this were the Kefraxi imprisoned with Yogg-Saron. Zakash and Kefix were the most ruthless and cunning Kefraxi generals during the days of the Black Empire, and Loken set them free. They sensed the touch of Yogg-Saron upon his mind, so they obeyed his orders, and they quickly went after the discs of Norgannon. Far to the south, the Kefraxi overtook Tyr and his followers, and the Titankeeper knew that there was only one option. He told Arcadis and Iron-Aya to take their forces and just keep going, while he would hold their ground and hold these dark creatures off. Only the bearish shadow of Agrimar's old power lingered within Tyr, yet he did hold his ground. For 6 days and 6 nights, arcane and shadow energy ripped through the once peaceful glade that they were fighting in, and Tyr realized that there was only one way to save the lives of his friends, by sacrificing his own. He unleashed all of his remaining powers upon the Kefraxi, a blinding explosion of arcane energy that shook the very bones of the world. Arcadis and Iron-Aya, they witnessed the explosion from far away. They returned to see their comrade fallen, yet with him was also the corpse of Zakash. Kefix had been able to barely escape the scene and was nowhere to be found. Now, in honor of Tyr's noble sacrifice, Iron-Aya named the area Tyr's Fall, which in the Vrykul tongue translated into Tirisfal. She and their followers buried Tyr and his foe where they lay, while placing Tyr's silver hand, the hand that he had created to replace the one that he lost during the battle with Galagrond, upon his final resting place. The Vrykul with them were so moved by the Keeper's actions that they decided to stay in the area and stand vigil over Tyr's grave until the end of their days. The rest of the party, they continued their mission and they traveled further on to a Titanforge vault called Ulduman. They vowed to protect Azeroth's history with their life, so after expanding the Titan vault and placing some of the Irvan in stasis, these Irvan, they'd started to feel the effects of the Curse of Flesh. their long watch began. The Mechanomes were also feeling the effects of the curse, but they chose to stay awake. Now meanwhile, back in Ulduar, Loken was losing his mind. He became desperate when he found out that the Kafraxi had failed in their mission and he couldn't steal the disc back since they could simply seal off Ulduman, so he took some desperate measures to assure his survival. He tried to replace the discs with an history of his own design called the Tribunal of Ages. He changed history to his liking, but the archive proved flawed and the history stored inside, they were warped even beyond Loken's understanding. It didn't matter, as long as history didn't portray him as the bad guy that he was. So after creating this, he made sure that no living creature would be able to contact Elgalon the Observer. He altered the Titan communication devices and he made it so that only his death would send a signal which would call out to Elgalon. In his mind, only Iron Aya or Arcadis would bring about his final demise, and if they did, this protocol would activate, Elgalon would come down and bring Loken's revenge with him by wiping out every living creature on the face of Azeroth. Time went on, and this is what happened with the Keepers in the northern part, but we still have High Keeper Ra to talk about, and his story is set around 15 to 12,000 years before the Dark Portal. For millennia, Ra had spent his time underground, while above the world didn't stand still. His Mogu, they tried to uphold this sacred charge, but with the creator falling silent and the curse of flesh hitting them hard, time simply changed. The Mogu faced mortality, fear and uncertainty took root in their hearts, and they formed small clans while waging war with each other. Clans and warlords emerged by the score and engaged in brutal power struggles. Those who triumphed were quickly toppled by rivals. Through it all, their culture and language, even their sense of purpose and identity, it began to change. This period of time is known as the Age of 100 Kings, where Mogu fought with each other for dominance, and the only thing that would dim their petty conflicts was the cycle of the Mantid Swarm. The Mantid, an evolution upon the Akir, they would swarm their lands, being pulled in by the lingering spirit of the old god Yasharaj. Every 100 years, the swarm would attack, their weak would die out, while their strong would return, turning their civilization into a very powerful army. Only this threat would unite the Mogu in a single purpose, but for one of them, namely Lei Shen, the world didn't seem right. He believed that there was more to his people, so instead of retaliating when his father was murdered by his close advisor, Lei Shen decided to abandon any claim to his father's power and set off in search of the Mogu's long-absent master, High Keeper Ra. After years of searching, Lei Shen found the Titan Keeper within a hidden vault beneath the land, all but forgotten by the Mogu. The High Keeper said nothing, not even when Lei Shen started to question him about the Mogu's true purpose. Days flowed into weeks, and still Ra remained silent, and Lei Shen grew frustrated. Finally, the Mogu realized that Ra was not contemplating some subtle plan, was not busy with the work of the Titans. He realized that the High Keeper had simply given up. All the suffering the Mogu had endured, the silence, was all because of an absent master and nothing more. Lei Shen unleashed his anger upon Ra, accusing him of abandoning the Titans and their purpose. His anger finally pushed Ra into action as he led Lei Shen to the nearby Thundering Mountain, where unending storms roared and split the heavens. The Mogu believed that the mountain had been forbidden, but inside, Ra then summoned the lingering power of Aman'Thul, and he showed Lei Shen the answers that he wanted. The Titans of the Pantheon were dead, murdered by one of their own, and their final hope was the world of Azeroth itself, a world already infested with creatures of the void. Ra expected that this information would shatter Lei Shen's soul and spirit, just like it had done with him, but Lei Shen saw it differently. He decided that if their master Ra had no intention of going on with the Titan's purpose, then he would do it himself in his own way. Without warning, Lei Shen struck out and stunned Raden. He bound the mighty being in enchanted iron bands, and he stole not only Raden's incredible power, he also took the contained power of Aman'Thul. This Mogu, Lei Shen, would forever be remembered as the Thunder King. Raden was imprisoned, while Lei Shen united his people into a mighty empire with the use of fear, power, or inspiration. For millennia, Raden would spend his time in darkness, while the world kept on spinning, life itself evolved and transformed, and the stage was set for many, many tales and adventures. And that's where the stories of the Titan Keepers within the Chronicles ends. But we have seen in-game what happened to a few of the Keepers, the Curse of Flesh and Yogg-Saron's schemes. Now the events of Lei Shen and Raden, they are set around 15 to 12,000 years before the Dark Portal, and the Dark Portal is set as year 0 on the timeline. So as you can imagine, a whole bunch of events took place in between. From the rise and fall of Lei Shen, to the War of the Ancients, to the Troll Empire and the formation of Quel'Thalas. A whole bunch of stories, but in this video, I want to focus on what happened to the Keepers. First up, we have Uldaman with Arcadis and Iron Aya. The Explorers League for the Alliance and the Reliquary for the Horde, they're busy excavating Uldaman and discovering its secrets. We went in for loot and glory, as well as to find knowledge and the discs of Norgannon. Now for those that have done the dungeon, you might already know that we are the ones who murder Arcadis and Iron Aya, which, if Tyr was still alive, he probably wouldn't be too happy about. Over the ages, Arcadis and Iron Aya, they grew distant from their servants. They became obsessed with trying to cure the Curse of Flesh. They often retreated into the lowest chambers of Uldaman, spending years in quiet contemplation. The two colossal Titan forests would eventually completely disappear from sight and settle into centuries of hibernation. This left some of the Earthen and Mechanomes to take care of Uldaman, but eventually some of the Mechanomes, they fell to the Curse of Flesh and they were turned into gnomes. With the curse, they lost all sense of purpose and abandoned the halls of Uldaman to the Mechanomes still able to fight against the curse, and some of the Earthen. When we come in, we're not alone, since some of the Dark Iron Dwarves have also begun searching for the treasures of Uldaman, and there are a whole bunch of Trogs just walking through the Titan facility. At the end of the dungeon, with Iron Aya and Arcadis defeated, we gain access to the discs of Norgannon, and we discover some bits about the history of the dwarves. Here it is, where we also learn that the Trogs are distant cousins of the dwarves, and the Chronicles give a little bit more information. When the Keepers used the Forge of Wills to create new Titan Forge to help them reshape the world, their first designs proved too complex and over-ambitious. They'd accidentally created stone-skinned savages known as the Trogs. Now the Keepers, they quickly refined and perfected their design, but they couldn't bear to destroy the Trogs. Instead, Iron Aya built a small subterranean vault, known as Uldaman, that would act as a stasis chamber for the Trogs. Some of them managed to escape imprisonment, they wandered the newly ordered world, while others even managed to find a way into the domain of Earth in the elemental plane of Deepholm. Now in our current time periods, within Uldaman, we can see that the Trogs are out of stasis, we take care of everything inside, and we claim our prize, our loot, and the information.
Who dares awaken Arcadis? Who dares the wrath of the Makers?
Next, there's Ulduar, with the events of Wrath of the Lich King. The Keepers are still locked away within Ulduar, while Thorim is still depressed. A very long quest chain has us motivate Thorim to take action against his brother. We mend fences with the frost giants that he had a war with. We forge him some new armor, a weapon, we even get his mount back, but all of this was just a scheme set up by Loken. He wanted to lure his brother away from the Temple of Storms and closer to the vicinity of his master. With the dark powers of Yogg-Saron backing him up, Loken is able to overpower his brother, drag him back into Ulduar, where the image of Sif takes control of his mind. Jochum, king of the ice giants, he wants to see Loken dead for all of his treacherous actions, so he sends adventurers into the Halls of Lightning to take care of him and bring back Loken's tongue.
My master has shown me the future, and you have no place in it. Azeroth will be reborn in darkness. Yogg-Saron shall be released. The Pantheon shall fall.
Bringing the Corrupted Keeper down isn't easy, but we're able to complete the mission, yet even without his tongue, Loken's schemes continue.
My death heralds the end of this world.
Just as he had planned, upon his death, a signal is sent out calling for Elgalon the Observer to come down and be tricked into doing Loken's dirty work, not to mention that Yogg-Saron, he's been gathering his power with no Titan Keepers to guard him.
How could we have missed this until now? Ah, King Varian. Thank you for coming on such short notice.
What's this all about, Ronan?
I've called you here to ask for your help. While our efforts against the Lich King press on, Bran here has brought us frightening news of the horrors beneath Ulduar and of its dark prisoner.
Prisoner? Huh. With its binding shattered, its influence unchecked, it's gonna come after us, and we're gonna be the prisoners.
It's again the Explorers League that leads the way as we fight our way through Ulduar and we smack some senses back into the Keepers. Hodir, Freya, Mimiron and even Thorim, they see reason once we do enough damage to them, and with their aid, we're able to push Yogg-Saron back into his prison. Hopefully, this time the Keepers will be able to maintain control, and even Elglon was able to see that Azeroth produced something special. Despite its corruption, or because of its corruption and the Curse of Flesh, Azeroth has produced beings not even the Titans could have foreseen, and they've been able to stand up against threats and the darkness, even Sargeras and the Legion. By trying to weaken the Titan Force, Yogg-Saron actually created his greatest enemies.
Citizens of Dalaran, raise your eyes to the skies and observe. Algalon was sent here to judge the fate of our world. He found a planet whose races had deviated from the Titans' blueprints. A planet where not everything had gone according to plan. Cold logic deemed our world not worth saving. Cold logic, however, does not account for the power of free will. It's up to each of us to prove this is a world worth saving. That our lives are worth living.
Which leaves us with the final Keeper to talk about, Keeper Ra during Mist of Pandaria. In ages past, Lei Shen had been defeated by the Tol'vir in Uldum with the use of the Forge of Origination. The Tol'vir were furious when they found out that Lei Shen had betrayed Raden, so they turned the Forge against his army, ending the reign of the Thunder King and eventually giving way to the Pandaren Empire to rise. The Zandalari, ancient allies of the Thunder King, they knew the secrets of bringing him back to life, and when the mist around Pandaria disappeared, they made the way to restore one of their greatest allies, and hopefully their once great empire. Heroes of the Alliance and Horde battled their way through the Isle of Thunder, eventually taking down the Thunder King himself. Beneath their feet, an ancient passageway opened up, and they found the imprisoned Titan Keeper.
For millennia I have waited in darkness, in silence, pierced only by the shrieks of the tormented, my dreams a waking nightmare. This twisted world is beyond redemption, beyond the reach of deluded heroes. The only answer to corruption is destruction, and that begins now. Wait! I am not your enemy. You are powerful, more powerful than he was even. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there is still hope. But there is a yawning chasm of darkness beneath you mortals, vast, endless, and all-consuming. I do not believe that you can correct this doomed course, but you have earned the right to try.
At first, Raden believes that this world is doomed, but again, we smack some sense into him. It's amazing how much you can accomplish by just hitting things, and afterwards he tells us that he's not our enemy. He doesn't believe that we can succeed, but we have earned the right to try. The rest of the story has us fighting against Garrosh, who has taken the heart of Yasharaj, but we claimed a heart of our own, namely the heart of Lei Shen, which we bring back to Rephion.
A chill just went up my spine.
Something tells me our friend has returned triumphant. The heart of a king. The powers of a god.
What are you doing? You're not seriously going to eat that.
It is filled with Titan magic. The very language of creation. Oh, I see them. A million worlds, glittering in their perfection. But one above all others. Oh,
We have fallen. We must rebuild the final Titan. Do not forget.
What are you trying to pull?
It is gone. I don't remember any of it. Oh, none of them remember. The irony.
What are you talking about? I don't trust you.
You are wise not to.
After eating the hearts of the Thunder King, and remember that Lei Shen didn't only take some of Raden's power, but also the remaining powers of Aman'Thul. After eating the heart of such a being, Rephion goes into a trance and he relays a message. We have fallen. We must rebuild the final Titan. Do not forget. We now know that the Pantheon has fallen, but we still don't know who this final Titan is. Do they mean the Titan spirit resting inside Azeroth, or do they mean Sargeras? The leader of the Burning Legion has been described as so powerful that he can cleave planets in two. Are we going to bring this fallen champion of the Pantheon to our side? Or are we going to bring the soul to life, described to be even more powerful than Sargeras himself? Only time will tell, and I honestly can't wait to find out. This is, however, where the stories of the Titan Keepers end, at least for the moment, since Legion, like I mentioned at the start, it will build upon Odin's story, and we might even see more details added to the overall storyline.
Hello everyone! Patch 8.3 is having us go back to the Veil of Eternal Blossoms, as the influence of N'Zoth is causing quite some darkness to spread across the world. What better reason than to go back and talk about the story of Lei Shen the Thunder King. Quite a few things connected to his story, they will play a part in the next patch. But of course, Lei Shen, he wasn't always known as the Thunder King. Once he was just a Mogu, a Titan forged, created by the Titan Keepers. This all goes back to the days of the origins of Azeroth, where the Pantheon, they found a planet corrupted by the old gods. Inside of it slumbered one of their kin, a Titan spirit, which the Pantheon had been desperately searching for. The corruption of the old gods, it was quite serious though. Their goal is to corrupt one of these titans and devour all of existence. The Titan Sargeras, he found out about these plans, set on a journey to wipe out all corruption that he could find. While the rest of the titans, they did not agree with that plan. There were already so few of them. There had to be a better way. So they set to work to save this Titan spirit from the old gods' corruption. Now their colossal might, it could easily overpower the old gods and rip them out of the surface, as they did with the old god Y'Shaarj, but doing so caused far too much damage to the world, to that spirit inside, defeating the purpose of trying to save it. So instead, they decided to create Titan Keepers to fight their war for them. Keepers like Loken, Tyr, Odin and Ra, and in turn, these keepers, they created their Titan Forge to help them battle the old gods, and later on, bring order to the world. Titan Forged, like the Vrykul, Tol'vir, Irvin and the Mogu. Their forces combined were able to win the war over the Black Empire, imprison the old gods, and patch up the wound which was left behind by ripping out Y'Shaarj. Several Titan facilities, they have been uncovered over the years. In the north near Ulduar, we can find the Forge of Wills, which not only helped the Titan spirit inside of the planet grow, it also allowed them to make more of their Titan Forged. Then in the south, near Ank'Qiraj, there's the Forge of Origination, which would not only help the Titan spirit grow, it also acts as a failsafe device. In the event that Azeroth's flora and fauna it succumbed to corruption, the incredible energies stored inside this great machine, it could be unleashed to eradicate all life on the world, which then allowed it to start anew. On his journey, Keeper Ra and his Titan Forged, they came across bits and pieces of Y'Shaarj that had fallen back onto the world. The biggest was its heart, and rather than destroy it, Ra and the others, they decided to keep it instead, build a subterranean vault to contain it and neutralize its evil. Studying the heart, it could help them understand the nature of the old gods and the other void creatures. It was the Mogu that were charged with watching over this vault. They would guard and care for the surrounding land as well. While the Tol'vir and the Nubasath, they were charged with guarding the Forge of Origination, and the remaining forces, they were told to guard Kafun in Silithus. With the job complete, the Titans left Azeroth behind in the hands of the Keepers, left the world to do its thing. In time, perhaps that Titan spirit, it would actually wake up. They done all that they could, and set off to find more of their kind. On a stormy day, Ra and his Mogu followers ascended a colossal mountain to see the Titans off. The legends say that the High Keeper slammed his weapon, the Fist of Raden, against a shield called the High Keeper's Ward, and the elements answered to his will. The rain ceased and the clouds parted. The mountain at their feet rose higher, and lightning and fire illuminated the skies, so that Ra and his followers could better glimpse the Titans. Lastly, the winds howled a sorrowful farewell. Yet, when the Titans ran into Sargeras again, they were unable to change his mind. He believed that purging the corruption, that was the only solution. His Burning Legion was formed to help him with this plan, and a heated argument between the Titans, it ended with Sargeras striking them down. Their spirits did not die though. Instead, they used their powers to protect themselves, launch into the Great Dark, towards the world of Azeroth and their keepers. There, the depleted spirits slammed into their keepers, who were immediately overwhelmed as the Titan powers flared in their minds. Puzzled and confused, they started to call out to the beloved creators for answers, but they received no reply. The deep silence, it troubled the keepers, which caused them to fall into a long period of confusion and unease. Something that the old god Yak'Sharan at Ulduar, he took great advantage of. He played his cards in such a way that Keeper Loken fell under his corruption. Together, they worked on weakening the bonds that kept Yak'Sharan imprisoned, things like the Curse of Flesh, as well as taking out the other keepers. Meanwhile, Keeper Ra also felt this influx of a Titan spirit inside of his body. But unlike the others, he actually figured out what was going on. The Pantheon, their creators had fallen. All that was left was this last bit inside of him. He extracted the lingering power of Aman'Fu from himself and carefully stored it in a mountain vault near what would become known as the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. He then retreated into the catacombs beneath the land to meditate on what he had learned. Now this didn't suddenly stop life on Azeroth, of course. It kept on growing and evolving. Over the millennia that followed, his loyal Mogu, they maintained their vigil over the Veil of Eternal Blossoms, bravely fighting off any threats that might try to take the area, like the Mented and their swarms. Their faith that the High Keeper would one day return to them, it endured through century after century of hardships. Yet that faith, it vanished once the Curse of Flesh, it manifested within the Mogu ranks. It had traveled all the way from Ulduar to the Veil, and this curse, it literally turned the Titanforged into fleshy beings. It weakened them and made them more vulnerable to the old god's corruption. For the first time, the Mogu faced mortality. Fear and uncertainty, it took root in their hearts. Small disagreements spiraled into conflict, violence and bloodshed. Packs of the Mogu started to band together. Clans and warlords, they emerged by the score and engaged in brutal power struggles with their own kinds. Those who triumphed were quickly toppled by their rivals. Through it all, their culture and language, even their sense of purpose and identity, it all began to change. Only their most basic instincts prevented total annihilation. The threats of the Mented were one of the few things that had the Mogu band together, but once the swarm was defeated, hostilities would surface again, and the cycle continued. And amongst the turmoil of these Mogu wars, a new leader would rise up to challenge their beliefs, their whole way of life.
The Thunder King comes. The Thunder King comes.
This introduction brings us to Lei Shen, a descendant of a minor warlord who grew up in a Mogu tribe together with Sparkmancer Wu. The two Mogu grew as close as brothers. As children, they played, quarreled, and challenged one another. It is said that this early rivalry was instrumental in developing Lei Shen's thirst for power. The future Thunder King saw his father betrayed and murdered, and their clansmen, they quickly found refuge in other clans. Only a few of them, the loyalist armsmen, refused to leave Lei Shen's side. And this Mogu, he was quite special, as he looked at their way of life, and he saw it as a betrayal of the Mogu's potential. There had to be more than just this cycle of warfare, just fighting amongst each other. There had to be a plan to all of it, a master purpose to explain all their suffering. He set out to find some answers, to find their long-absent High Keeper Ra, or Raden as the Mogu now called them, Raden in the new language. Some of their people didn't even believe that Raden was still out there, but that didn't stop Lei Shen from trying. After years of searching, he located the entrance to the hidden vaults beneath the lands north of the Veil, sacred chambers, where the High Keeper, he was just sitting quietly in the stillness beneath the earth. Raden showed no reaction to the young Mogu's intrusion. The High Keeper said nothing at all, even as Lei Shen began to ask him the questions about the Mogu's true purpose. Days and then weeks passed by, and Lei Shen grew frustrated with his master's silence. Finally, the Mogu realized that Ra, he was not contemplating some subtle plan, was not engrossed in the work of the Titans. The High Keeper had simply given up. The suffering of the Mogu had been the result of an absentee master, and nothing more. Furious, he unleashed on Ra, accusing him of abandoning the Titans and their purpose. These harsh words, they finally roused the High Keeper, as Ra decided to take Lei Shen to the nearby Thundering Mountain, where unending storms roared and split the heavens. No Mogu had dared scale its slopes before, for the mountain was believed to be a forbidden place. Inside a massive ordnance vault, Raden then summoned that lingering power of Aman'Thul and showed Lei Shen the answers that he wanted. The Titans of the Pantheon were dead, murdered by one of their own. Their final hope was the world of Azeroth itself, but it was already infected with creatures of the void. Now Ra, he had assumed that this knowledge would shatter Lei Shen's soul as it had his own, but the Mogu, he had other plans in mind. If his master had no interest in continuing the Titan's purpose, then he would do it himself. Without warning, he struck out and incapacitated Raden. Lei Shen then bound the mighty being in enchanted iron bands, stole not only Raden's incredible powers, but also the contained powers of Aman'Thul. In that moment, the Thunder King was born, imprisoning Raden before returning to his people. With the powers of the Creator, it was time to unify the Mogu, have them stop fighting each other, and focus once more on the glorious purpose bestowed upon them by the Titans. Or at least that was Lei Shen thought, but really it was much closer to what he believed to be their purpose.
The Mogu tell a legend about Lei Shen, the Thunder King. It is said that he tore out the very heart of the Mogu god. And from that hateful act, he gained power over wind and storm. His followers fell to their knees before him. "We will call you the Lightning King," they said. But Lei Shen did not agree. "Lightning strikes in an instant and is over in a flash," he said. "But Thunder proclaims the coming of the storm. Thunder quakes the skies long before the lightning strikes, and thunder echoes in the hills long after lightning's power is spent. It is thunder that sends animals cowering and fills the hearts of peasants with dread. Let thunder be my herald, so that my power is felt throughout the land. I will be the Thunder King."
Initially, most of the Mogu, they rallied to him out of fear, but his miracles soon inspired devotion. The Thunder King had mastered the enchanted tools of the Keepers. One of these was the Engine of Nalashka, a powerful device that Lei Shen had discovered beneath the land, north of the Veil. Using this extraordinary machine, the Mogu began shaping flesh and stone into brand new living creatures. They even found a way to reverse that curse of flesh. Under Lei Shen, a period of prosperity and brutality, it gripped the Veil. For the Mogu, it was the beginning of a glorious new empire. Yet for the region's other races, it marked the start of an age of tyranny. Since their history with the curse of flesh, it meant that Lei Shen, he saw any beings of flesh, any mortals of the world as beneath them. Over time, the land of the Mogu, it saw creatures like the Jinyu, the Hosen, the Yongle, and the Pandaren occupy the area. The Pandaren were especially intelligent, and their love for peace, it had them grow close to the wild gods of the land, namely Suen the White Tiger, Julan the Jade Serpent, Chi-Ji the Red Crane, and Yao Zhao the Black Ox. They called them the August Celestials, so when Lei Shen's war raged across the land, the Pandaren, they fled to Kunlai Summit for the protection of the White Tiger. In response, Lei Shen brought his armies to the foothills, and he challenged Suen to a duel that would decide the fate of the Pandaren. Suen accepted, and for many days, the great battle between the White Tiger and the Thunder King, it shook the skies over Kunlai. In the end, our poor wild god could not match Lei Shen's stolen Titan powers. He was chained near the peak of the mountain, forced to watch as the Mogu bound the Pandaren to slavery. The other Celestials also tried to help the Pandaren, but again, the might of the Thunder King, it proved to be far too much to handle. So it was that Lei Shen, he forbade the Pandaren from worshipping the Celestials. Most of them lost all of their ties to the wild gods, but some amongst them, some of the fearless slaves, they carried on the teachings of the Celestials in secret. On top of that, they were also not allowed to pick up arms of any kind, which would eventually result in the teachings of the monk, and they had to speak the language of the Mogu. To disobey was to be killed in slow and brutal fashion. The Mogu forced their greatest palaces and monuments with the blood and sweat of their subjugated races. Soon, the Empire boasted a unified language, an established system of weights and measurements, and the first set of written laws in Azeroth to make sure that all knew the Mogu were above all other creatures. The slaves were also turned into soldiers. The hardest labor, it fell on their shoulders, like the creation of the serpent spine to keep the Mented out of their lands. Lei Shen was fully aware that the Mented, with all their strength, they would never bow to his authority. He commanded his slaves to construct the serpent spine, a magnificent wall that spanned the length of the empire. It took many generations to build, but Lei Shen knew that fear would motivate his subjects. The fear of the Mented, it moved mountains, raised armies, secured his empire, and built him this wall. And when existing slaves perished or proved inefficient, Lei Shen, he shaped new ones with the power of the engine of the Lashka. You might remember exploring the cave with Vol'jin, where he announced that this was some bad voodoo. They shaped creatures like the Grummels or the Saurok. Another thing that was added to the arsenal were the Fist of Raden and the High Keeper's wards. Lei Shen had taken them with him when he betrayed Raden, yet for all his might, he could not harness the energies of the artifacts. His inability to do so, it infuriated him. After all, Lei Shen had conquered the Mogu and forced them into an empire. He had defeated Ra. How could two artifacts defy his will? But defy him they did. The shield and the fist weapon were simply too much even for the Thunder King to control. Every time he tried to use the artifacts, elemental energies they lashed out at Lei Shen and overwhelmed him. Despite these repeated failures, Lei Shen did not give up. One way or another, he would harness the power of these ancient weapons. Eventually, he decided to give them to a gifted blacksmith, Forge Master Deng. The Thunder King ordered him to unlock the artifact secrets, but he also warned the artisan not to harness their power for himself, or he would suffer grave consequences. Deng promised Lei Shen that he would follow his commands, but secretly he plotted to disobey his master. The blacksmith reasoned that if he could find a way to use the weapon and the shield, something that the Thunder King had been unable to do so, he could take control over the Mogu Empire himself. While Deng was tampering with the Fist of Raden, a bolt of lightning tore down from the sky and slammed into him. Thankfully for him, the artifact absorbed most of the energy, which saved his life, but Deng did not escape unharmed. The lightning left him forever disfigured. Knowing that wielding them was not going to be an option, he then started experimenting, eventually finding a purpose for the artifacts. He started to use them to power an immense engine known as the Thunder Forge. This machine, it churned day and night, creating armaments of exceptional quality for the Mogu military. Lei Shen was very pleased by the work, and he ordered Deng to personally craft him weapons and armor that would put all others to shame. The blacksmith toiled over the Thunder Forge to satisfy his master. His labors gave rise to what would be his three greatest creations: a massive spear, a battle axe, and a mighty helm. His helm would become so well known that his enemies would flee at the mere sight of it. And his spear, it murdered thousands of innocents. It is said that the Thunder King could throw his axe with brutal accuracy, and when it hits its targets, it made a sound like crashing thunder. Under the leadership of Lei Shen, the Mogu Empire and power, it vastly grew in scope. It started to draw the attention from other civilizations in Azeroth, like the Zandalari. They too had quite an empire to boast about, and they figured that the Mogu would make for some amazing allies. They might hold the power of this world, but the trolls held the knowledge of the land. The two empires would make each other great, teach each other their secrets. Once they were allied, nothing in Azeroth would dare oppose them, and Lei Shen was intrigued by the offer, even decided to go along with it. The Zandalari were trained in the ways of arcane magic, promised quite a bit of land in the Vale, and in exchange, they shared the knowledge of the land. Unknown to all of their people was that both leaders were actually plotting to betray one another, using them for what they needed and then toss them to the sides. But their allegiance, it proved to be so beneficial for both sides that the whole betrayal thing, it never really came to be. In fact, Lei Shen even confided in the Zandalari. He had come up with a way that, in case he would die, his spirit could be revived. Knowing that the rest of his people, they were power-hungry bastards. He couldn't exactly trust the Mogu to do it, so the secret of his resurrection, it was passed on to the Zandalari. Meanwhile, over at Uldum, the Tolver, they performed their duties, guarded the area, waiting patiently for word from High Keeper Ra or his Mogu servants. They had no idea what Lei Shen had done. So when they were summoned to the Vale, they were stunned to see exactly how advanced their Mogu cousins had become. They'd even managed to reverse the curse of flesh, something that the Tolver also had to deal with. And while the brutal enslavement of the land, it shocked them, they didn't take action. Their main concern was the protection of the machineries in Uldum, and the Thunder King agreed. In his mind, he was still working in line with the plans of the Keepers, so bringing Uldum and their machines into his empire, it was the only logical way to go. With his stolen powers, the engine of Nalashka, and the Forge of Origination under his command, they could remake all of Azeroth as they saw fit, but that's not how the Tol'vir saw it. They were outraged, hearing what Lei Shen had done to the Keeper. The Thunder King, he might offer them a high position within his empire, but that didn't matter to them. Their loyalty and love for Ra, it was unquestionable, so they stormed out of the empire, vowing to never serve a traitor. Good enough for Lei Shen. If they weren't going to sign up willingly, then it would take Uldum by force. The Tol'vir, they could never stand against the might of his armies, against the might of the Thunder King. He was so sure of his victory that he decided to invite the Zandalari to accompany him to witness what he claimed would be the Mogu Empire's greatest victory yet. Those that he had trusted to hold his secret to his resurrection, they ventured with him into the lush jungles of Uldum, imagining themselves unlocking the secrets of immortality. Uldum at the time was quite a little paradise, teeming with undiscovered life and wonders as far as the eye could see. The full might of Lei Shen's empire, it trampled over the lands, and to greet them was just a small group of Tol'vir. Hardly worth the efforts, but what Lei Shen didn't realize was that the Tol'vir had a secret weapon. Don't forget that the Forge of Origination, it has the power to wipe out all life on the planet. With a bit of tinkering, with a couple of adjustments, they wouldn't have to use its full potential, it would only scour the nearby lands. As Lei Shen led the charge, gloating in his impending victory, the Tol'vir activated the weapon. Deep within the earth, the device rumbled to life. The earth heaved and buckled as waves of force erupted from Uldum, bathing the surrounding land in the energies of uncreation. The Tol'vir's defenders, and nearly every other creature on the surface of Uldum, they died that day instantly. Creatures all across Kalimdor witnessed the flash on the southern horizon, and when it subsided, Lei Shen and his allies were no more. The release of so much power also meant that the lands of Uldum, they would forever be changed. Now, it's more like the desert that we know it as today, with just small pockets of life remaining. The surviving Tol'vir within Uldum, they worked to ensure that no one would ever again attempt to claim such power. They shrouded the few passages that led into the region with magic. In doing so, the Tol'vir effectively sealed Uldum off from the eyes of mortals, which is why we didn't explore this area until the Cataclysm, which rocked these magical defenses and revealed the land for all to see. Before the Tol'vir completely shrouded Uldum in their grand illusion, a handful of Thunder King loyalists, they recovered Lei Shen's corpse from the region. They brought it back to the Empire and enshrined it within the Tomb of Conquerors, where it would rest for millennia. The Tol'vir's noble sacrifice, it had kept the Forge of Origination out of Lei Shen's hands, and prevented any other Mogu Emperor from daring to follow in his footsteps. Lei Shen's death had quite an impact on the Mogu Empire. The new emperors, they would rise up, but none would ever wield as much power as he had. Not to mention the deaths of many of the highest-ranking Zandalari. There were those amongst the people still alive that knew the secrets on how to resurrect Lei Shen, but the rebuilding and recovering of this, it kept them quite occupied. They would spend generations trying to recover from the losses at Uldum. Neither would ever regain his former glory, and in time, both empires would crumble and fall.
But seasons change and tyrants die. His fury spent in times gone by. The thunder slept beneath Kunlai.
Secure the remains, brothers.
In the meantime, with the Thunder King gone and new Mogu emperors rising up, the Pandaren saw their chance to rise up as well and rebel against their slavers. They were still forbidden to touch a weapon, so instead they learned how to use their own bodies to fight. The art of the monk, it spread far and wide across the lands. The many races of Pandaria banded together and overthrew the Mogu masters. This gave way for a brand new empire, one built on the principles of justice, wisdom, and benevolence. Yet the Zandalari, they had not forgotten about a promised piece of land that Lei Shen was supposed to give them. Figuring that the Pandaren were not really likely to uphold their bargain, and knowing that they were strong enough to overthrow the Mogu, the trolls decided to invade Pandaria and take the land by force. Our Pandaren friends were in quite a panic over this. They didn't exactly hold a standing army. Luckily, one amongst them, Zheng, she had tamed a cloud serpent. Its aerial abilities, it brought them the advantage they needed to turn the tide of war. Soon enough, more followed her example. The order of the Cloud Serpents rose up and took the sky. It forced the trolls to play their final card, their final tactic, resurrecting the Thunder King. He would surely have the power to purge the troublesome Serpent Riders, destroy any army underground. A pitched battle, it erupted near the Tomb of Conquerors, where Jang was forced to sacrifice herself in a final, desperate attack, which killed the Zandalari leader. The other Zandalari soon broke ranks and fled back to their homeland in shame. Through her heroic acts, Lei Shen's resurrection was postponed, and Pandaria entered a time of relative peace, helped quite a bit by the Emperor Xiaohao, who knew of the coming of the Legion. He was aware that the War of the Ancients was about to play out, and to defend his people, he became one with the land, hiding Pandaria in the mists. This act would keep them hidden from the world for millennia, and the threat of the Thunder King it remained contained within its tomb. Fast forward to the expansion Mist of Pandaria. As with the Cataclysm, these mystical mists, they vanished around the land, and is discovered by the Alliance and the Hordes. They are bringing quite a bit of warfare to these peaceful lands, which is enough of a problem on its own. But in Pandaria it becomes extra bad. When those bits and pieces of Yasharaj fell back into the planet, it infused this piece of land with the Sha, a force that feeds on negative emotions. So our coming here, it brings about a whole bunch of problems. Problems that we need to clean up. A brand new lando, brand new resources, new people and weaponry to discover. This is great fuel for the war effort between the Alliance and the Hordes. But they're not the only ones who find out about this recently rediscovered land. The Zandalari, guided by Prophet Zul, they've come to collect what was promised so long ago. Now they need it more than ever, as the Cataclysm, it caused their beautiful Zandalar to sink into the ocean. At least, that's the story that they tried to sell back then. Zul, he kinda exaggerated the damage, considering, Zandalar is still there. But all the same, the trolls are desperate for a new piece of land, and work hard to bring back their old ally, the Thunder King. They find his body in the tomb, and bring it back to the Isle of Reckoning, where Prophet Karzul performed the ancient ritual. Despite heroes doing their very best to stop this, the ritual is finally a success. After millennia of waiting, the Thunder King, he walks the land once more.
Pandaria, her hills of gold, in dark and mournful times of old, did once a hopeless horror hold. When from her sacred veil did spring, with storm and flash, a monstrous thing, his name, Lei Shen, the Thunder King. His thunder boomed across the land, and none who dared and fought could stand against the Iron Tyrant's hands. A palace grand, a walled domain, such mighty works born of his reign, built by slaves, their hearts in chains. But seasons change and tyrants die, his fury spent in times gone by. The thunder slept beneath Kunlai.
Secure the remains, brothers.
By Zandalari hands, he has been taken. By Zandalari voice, he has awakened. Heroes, sound the drums. The Thunder King comes. The Thunder King comes.
He gathers his new Zandalari allies, as well as the Mogu troops ever loyal to their king, and they make base within the Throne of Thunder on the Isle of Thunder. An isle most believed to be a legend. Few even knew that it was real. But there it is, where unending storms roar and split the heavens. Here it is, where we see the Alliance and Horde gather their forces to assault the Thunder King in his home. They're not exactly working with each other. Jaina Proudmoore, she's pissed off at the Hordes because she lost her home to the bombing of Fedamore and the betrayal with the Divine Bell. On the other hand, we have Lorfmar Faran, who's pissed off at Jaina that purged Dalaran, murdered and imprisoned their people just because they were used by Garrosh to steal this Divine Bell, an artifact of great power, one of many that War Chief Garrosh was looking for. In the 117th year of the Thunder King's reign, the Kroon Spellweavers approached Lei Shen with their greatest creation, a bell caused from the Maker's flesh, shaped by stars' fire, and bound by the breath of darkest shadow. This bell, when rung, it could shake the world and call to the heavens. Taken to war, the bell's cacophonous tones, it stirred the heart of Lei Shen's warriors. It fueled their hatred and anger, lending them strength on the field of battle. The bell's screaming voice, it struck fear and doubt in the hearts of the Emperor's enemies, sending them fleeing in his path. Awed by its power, the Thunder King described the instrument as the voice of the gods, and he named it Shen King, also known as the Divine Bell. Caused from the Maker's flesh, to the Mogu there could only be one Maker, the Keeper chained up by Lei Shen, but we'll get to that in a moment. So the Divine Bell was sought out by the Alliance and the Hordes. The Alliance got there first and decided to hide away from the Hordes. In turn, the Horde used the connections in Dalaran to steal the bell for the War Chief, which led to the purge in Dalaran. It's thanks to Anduin Wrynn that the Divine Bell could not be used by Garrosh in this war. He did try to master its powers, but Anduin, he discovered the harmonic mallet, which was created by the Pandaren to counter the bell, to turn its echoes of chaos into perfect harmony. In his rage, Garrosh smashed all the bones in Anduin's body, together with the bell. He'd find other ways of empowering his forces, like finding the heart of Yasharaj, but that in a nutshell is why the Alliance and Hordes are not exactly friendly with each other. While messing with the other side, they do focus on assaulting the Isle of Thunder. Step by step, they take on the forces of the Zandalari and the Thunder King, carving out a path to the throne of Thunder, and even picking up some of the Pandaren wisdom along the way.
It ends today! Here, the cycle ends when you, Regent Lord, and you, Lady Proudmoore, turn from one another and walk away.
Jaina and Lorfmar decide to turn away from each other and focus on the threat of Garrosh instead. We still have the Thunder King to deal with though, waiting inside of his seat of power. And going straight through the door, that's going to be challenging, as Nalak guards the walls of his hidden citadel. At some point, Lei Shen discovered a rare clutch of thundering cloud serpents, and he set to subjugating them. The largest hatchling fiercely resisted. And when Lei Shen visited the handling pens, he laughed mightily at the charred Mogu that lined the walls. He took this hatchling for his own, and for its obedience granted its power over the storms and the sky. For thousands of years following the death of the Thunder King, Nalak has remained ever dutiful and will strike out at any that dare to approach. With our Pandaren allies, we've secured another way to get into the throne, where, even after he died, great swaths of corrupted energy lingered. Now, the resurrected Thunder King and the Zandalari trolls, they intend to harness that energy to establish the reign of Lei Shen once again. Best to not let that happen, and the raid shows us the power this ancient old allegiance has granted Lei Shen. First up is Jinrock the Breaker.
The Thunder King, give me power! Come, I'll show you.
When the Thunder King awoke, he rewarded the most loyal and ambitious Zandalari trolls with power beyond their wildest dreams. The Berserker Jinrock was one of the first to receive the King's blessing, and even though Lei Shen's gift nearly tore his body apart, the troll is now capable of calling the fury of the storm in battle.
How you bit me?
His seat of power is looking a little bit tarnished. But then again, our home, it would have looked ready for guest either if we'd been dead for millennia. Over the bridge we go, where trolls patrol the sky, and a mighty storm is trying to push us off to an unfortunate early demise. Good memories here, of raid members just unable to get across this part. Not until the ads have been killed and the storm has vanished. Next up is Horadon, who does not come alone.
Welcome, weaklings, to the rebirth of the Zandalari Empire! The Kaladechuka Horadon, Kalamaste!
The Zandalari brought powerful creatures with them to the Isle of the Thunder King to use as engines of war. Led by the war god Jalak, the Dinomancers of the Zandalari Beast Ward use ancient tribal magics to strengthen the great beast and command obedience. The horns of Horadon, the fabled mount of Jalak himself, it can tear through the stone walls of a keep as a blade cuts through silk. And from the gates, different tribes of troll that we faced in the past, they appear. It's kinda cool to see that the unification that was started back in the Cataclysm with the badass cinematic in which Vol'jin, he walks away from the offer to join them, it also plays its part here in the next expansion. The trolls go all out, trying to claim a new home, but we can't turn the dinosaur against them to seal off the gates. Until as Yalak, he has no choice but join the fight as well.
Kalakarasti, Hododon, destroy them!
Together they go down, and we go onwards towards a familiar face. Garajal the Spiritbinder, he makes his return. We fought him before in the Mogu vaults, where Garajal was ordered by Zul to break in, discover any weapons or secrets they might be able to add to the Zandalari might. The vaults were built and expanded upon by Lei Shen when he got into power. It contains and protects its secrets, many of the Empire's lost artifacts, and is the resting place of the spirits of old Mogu kings. Garajal and his forces, they didn't get very far into the place, as we too visited the vaults. Together with Lore Walker Cho, we delved deep into Mogu history, and we uncovered that this is the location of the Engine of Nalashka. The one which held the power that Lei Shen and his followers had used in the past to shape flesh and stone into brand new living creatures. Joe dares not to think what damage such a machine would cause to Pandaria. We had to destroy it and its protectors. Stone soldiers who've been motionless for centuries, now awakened by our entry. With the final fight against the will of the Emperor, Zinzi and Janzi, some of Lei Shen's mightiest creations. But back in the Throne of Thunder, Garajal already told us that to him, death is merely a doorway and time is a window. He is back now, resurrecting the fallen that we slay, until we reach the Council of Elders.
Lei Shen, let us prove to you the might of the Zandalari. We will crush these intruders where they stand. We will never fail you.
Drakari, Faraki, Amani, and the Gurubashi. Here they make their stand with the promise of an unstoppable empire. Garajal even empowers them during the encounter, which makes their already formidable abilities quite deadly, but not even that is enough to bring that glorious future that they envisioned to be a reality.
You have swept the filth from my doorstep. Perhaps you are worthy of my attention. But your trespass ends here. None may enter my forbidden stronghold. I shall rebuild this bridge with your bones for bricks.
Looks like Lei Shen isn't quite ready to see us yet. The bridge is destroyed and we're sent to the underbelly of the palace, with a couple of creatures they've made themselves quite at home. Creatures like Tortos, for example. Over the millennia, small amounts of Mogu flesh-shaping magic, it seeped into the caverns below the Thunder King's citadel. Dark energies warped one of the chamber's native dragon turtles, melding it to the surrounding crystalline walls. Known as Tortos, this amalgamation of flesh and stone, it has since feasted on the cave's rich mineral deposits and grown to a colossal size. So large, in fact, that it now blocks our path forward and has to be destroyed. Its skin will spin into battle, which could cause quite a bit of trouble for the raids, but also used to kick back at Tortos and stop his casting. Now, I never really noticed this before, but his death animation is just shattering into little pieces. Knowing its story now, a nice little detail. Forward we go into the Forgotten Depths, where we have to ring 3 of the Mogu bells to awaken Megara. Even the most callous amongst the Mogu quiver at the thought of the dark experiments performed at the Thunder King's behest. Long ago, a young cloud serpent was twisted in a multi-headed hydra and left to languish between Lei Shen's throne. Now the twisted creature lurks deep in the Forgotten Depths, awaiting the moment it may finally inflict its terrible agony upon others. Unfortunately for us, we're the first thing it gets to see, the first thing that gets to feel its agony, and as many heads seem endless. When one is cut down, 2 more rise up from the depths of the water, spewing fire, ice, poison, all kinds of nasty stuff. We have to keep cutting away until the beast loses its strength. Onwards to Jikun's roost, and in these tunnels everything is massive and dangerous. Hanging out underneath the Thunder King is quite an effect on even the smallest of the creatures. The slugs themselves are gigantic and extremely lethal. Not surprising, as the Mogu flesh shapers discarded their failed creations in an abyssal shaft beneath Lei Shen's keep. The reek of decay, it then lured many scavengers to the refuse pits, including the great Shikun. Ruthless and cunning, the monstrous bird devoured the rivals one by one, until it was she who held sole dominion over the shadowy tunnel. Heroes had to fly out to her nest and slay her young before they became a problem. they had to defeat the master of these tunnels.
Thousands of years without new playthings. I will enjoy this.
Lei Shen commanded his sorceress to mold an aberration that could peer into the heart of his followers and detect any betrayal. From this decree, Doroomu was given life. The clever entity, it stubbornly obeyed its masters until the Thunder King's death, at which time it disappeared into the Citadel's labyrinth corridors. Only recently has Doroomu, all but forgotten by the Mogu, emerged from hiding. The massive ice gaze is quite painful, and the fog hides many secrets. Only by hitting the ants with the right color would they be revealed long enough to be slain. Not to mention that freaking maze that he summons that force teams to maneuver through. I remember it as being quite painful.
Welcome the Void's embrace.
We will not be forgotten. No.
Deep within the bowels of Lei Shen's island citadel, Mogu flesh shapers formed the Saurak out of a magical substance of unknown origin. When the citadel was abandoned, some of these experiments languished in the dark pools for far too long. Poor Primordius, he is one of those. Look at the poor Saurak, all alone down here, left forgotten after countless of experiments. This did give him the ability to mutate himself, which is kinda cool I suppose. Depending on the ads that reach him, he'll mutate and obtain new powers. All the same, best to just put it out of its misery.
Stop them! The Animus must not be disturbed!
During his reign, Lei Shen labored to build a mechanical servant that would defend his citadel without fear. When his first attempt failed, rage took hold over the Thunder King. He poured his negative emotions into the next and most successful creation, the Dark Animus. To this day, the Ornate Construct observes his duty, empowered by a mysterious substance at the heart of all Mogu flesh-shaping experiments. That's what the Dungeon Journal tells us. While the weekly quest, it gives credit to Arch-Ritualist Kil'jaeden to have shaped the Animus by command of the Thunder King. Either way, our next boss awaits us.
You have doomed yourselves. It is unleashed.
This anima that they used to empower the constructs, don't confuse it with the anima that we're gonna collect in the Shadowlands. This stuff is probably the blood of Raden, but we know for sure that it's vital for the flesh shaping and creating of life that Lei Shen has done. Powerful stuff indeed. So much so that lore from honest blood elves, they took interest in it. They sent out adventurers to gather this power so they can study it and apply it to their own constructs. We have actually seen this play out in game, as the constructs that are now used by the blood elves, they're very much like the Dark Animus one. Now finally, we can get out of the underbelly, out of the sewer, and breathe some fresh air, right into the Iron Quan encounter.
Stare into the face of true power!
Legends speak of the brutality of Quan and his Quillen champions. The fearless Mogu commander was dubbed Iron Quan by the Thunder King for his unrelenting resolve to claim victory after victory for the Empire, regardless of the cost. Bit of a shame he couldn't claim victory while fighting us. After him, we enter a room where they're doing something with the images of the August Celestials. They do play a part in the Twin Consort encounter. They were actually minigames that you had to win in order to buff and help out the raid. Sadly, I'm all on my own here, so I can't really show you. Either way, the Twin Consorts, they're said to be the greatest of the Thunder King's treasures, rumored to be the only known female Mogu in existence. Lei Shen keeps his trophies close, and their combined arsenal against interlopers even closer. The sun and the moon fight in unison, but the part about them being the only female Mogu in existence, yeah, those really were only rumors. Still, for someone like the Thunder King, I'd imagine they'd be quite a treasure.
I can see the light.
And after making our way through a very deadly staircase, we finally get to say hello to the man of the hour, Lei Shen, the Thunder King.
You have earned my ire. I will make an example of you, such that all who look upon my might will tremble and submit. I am Lei Shen, slayer of kings and gods. You have made a grave mistake.
The power of the storm, his stolen might from Raden and Aman'Fu, it's unleashed upon us. Whereas the Blood Elves, they sought out the Dark Animus to upgrade their forces. On the Alliance side, they asked by Jaina to take her Staff of Antonidas and drain the remaining power from the Thunder King's Deus. The very powers of the Thunder King now course through the staff. I might have forgotten, but I don't recall them actually using this for the story later on. Like I said before, we have seen the Blood Elves show up with their new constructs, but I don't actually recall Jaina using the powers of the staff. Maybe some for the future, maybe I've forgotten. Either way, going over this story, it does make me realize that Lei Shen, he could have been so much more than just a single patch boss. But still, very awesome to see how much backstory they created for him. To read about a Titan Forged that looked around himself and said, "This is not what we're supposed to be like. I'll seek out our creator, I'm going to find the answers," despite everyone believing that this is just it. And when he found Raden, lost and hopeless, he didn't follow him into despair. He decided to carve out his own destiny, thinking to act in the way that his creators would have wanted. This of course led to massive pain and suffering for the people of Pandaria, yet also an empire that rose up and held dominance over the lands.
Benevolence is a luxury for the strong, young prince. No great empire was ever built with kindness.
I'm not so sure about that. But I can tell you no great empire has ever stood the test of time by crushing its own citizens. Remember, the Mogu were overthrown. That should be the lesson of the Thunder King. It's your move, by the way.
I worry you may be too soft to wear your kingdom's crown, Prince Anduin. You would do well to learn some of your father's hardness.
Quite the character, this Lei Shen. And the Throne of Thunder, it held a little surprise for those that defeated him on heroic.
I sought only to finish the work of the gods.
Down the chamber in which we fought Primordius, there is Raden, chained up and hopeless as ever.
This twisted world is beyond redemption, beyond the reach of deluded heroes. The only answer to corruption is destruction, and that begins now.
And we do the thing that we usually do. We smack some sense into him with a whole lot of violence. He does not believe that we can succeed, but we have earned the right to try. To which he pops off into a little ball of energy and then flies away. From here on out, we would see Garrosh pick up the heart of Sargeras and the world rising up against him. The Veil of Eternal Blossoms, it was hit hard by rejuvenating the heart, but our efforts, our victory, it gave it a chance to regrow, to rebuild, something that we'll see the results of in the next patch. Even Raden and the Mogu, they will see their story continued. Potentially maybe a new allied race. But for now, you're up to speed with the story of Lei Shen and the history of the Mogu. A history that our Black Dragon friend Rephion, he was also really curious about during Mr. Pandaria. At one point, he even asked us to bring him the heart of Lei Shen, which he could then devour. And keep in mind that this was before the release of Warcraft Chronicles, before we knew the fate of the Titans.
Oh, we have fallen. We must rebuild the final Titan. Do not forget.
I really wonder what kind of storyline they had in mind back then. Rebuilding the final Titan, most likely Azeroth, or maybe this is actually still a story waiting to be told. Battle for Azeroth was all about healing the world, not so much about rebuilding it. I wonder what the future might bring. Hello everyone. As I was sitting here, thinking of ways and angles to get people up to speed on what they might have missed with the story of the Shadowlands. Ultimately, the best course of action, it seems to be doing the story of the Jailer. The most beloved character that they've ever introduced in World of Warcraft. We're going to talk about his history, his motives as far as we know it, his plans, and how that echoed throughout the story of Warcraft. Now, it's anyone's guess if or when the events from the Shadowlands will actually make an impact on the overall story again. But it is still part of the lore, it is still part of the story. So let's get into it.
Beyond the veil lies darkness, where every soul has its place.
The Jailer, as well as the other Eternal Ones. The ones that we know being the Primus, the Winter Queen, the Archon, and the Sire. They were all created within Zereth Mortis. This is the domain created by the first ones to act as their workshop. to create these eternal beings, to create more afterlives for the Shadowlands, potentially create the Warcraft universe as a whole. The first ones themselves, they're still quite a mystery, and a lot of information, it's either biased or speculative. They are seemingly responsible for the creation of the universe, if not the ordering of it. With their design, there also comes a pattern, a purpose, if you will, a predestined plan. Now, it might seem insane to have a force out there that's able to predict and potentially manipulate our stories, our heroes and villains, to set them on a certain path. But we have seen really clear moments in-game in which those designs of the first ones actually came to be.
The sacred words tell us the Waystones would respond only to certain living mortals, the ones destined to save the realms of death. The more. Let the prophecy be fulfilled. If it is the will of the first ones, this Waystone will open to you, mortal. The sacred words spoke of your coming. Blessed be the first ones.
They were able to predict that at some point in time, the Maw-walkers, they were going to show up in the Shadowlands to stop Zoval's plans, as they placed stones at precise locations, which they prophesied that the Maw-walkers could use to escape and move the troops around. You might argue that these stones were just randomly dropped there in multiple places like a failsafe. But then one has to wonder, why do so in a place like the Maw, a place where no soul is supposed to escape? Or why drop it in a place like Zereth Mortis, where no one is supposed to go? The fates have been read. People knew that we were going to come. Better yet, perhaps we should also ask ourselves that if the first ones were able to predict that we were going to need these Waystones to stand up against Zoval, then why exactly did they let Zoval happen to begin with? It's a good question. Speaking of, what exactly happened with Zoval, since this video is on his story after all? Well, he didn't start out as the jailer imprisoned within the Maw. His original design was to perform the role of the Arbiter. He judged the souls that arrive in the Shadowlands. In an instant, he would know the entirety of their existence. And time after time, do you know what he saw? He saw fragile beings left to the fickle whims of fate. Their world, their kin, whether they were wise or simple, hale or sickly, these things were forced upon them. From the moment they drew their first breath until they exhaled their last, the choice was never theirs.
From our first breath to our last, every decision is made for us. Then, the afterlife decides what eternity we must endure. We can't even choose who we...
And when their lives ended, it was his duty to decide their soul's fate for all of eternity, sending them off to whatever domain that they belonged.
You have betrayed your duty as Arbiter, and shall be bound forevermore. Your madness has threatened the cycle of life and death entire.
You could have sought another way, brother. Imagine what we could have accomplished together.
Why, Zoval? What drove you to this end? You preserve that which is doomed. A cosmos divided will not survive. What is to come?
And along the way, he saw something that shook him to his core, that made him believe that the designs of his makers, the designs of the first ones, were flawed. They were just preserving that which was ultimately doomed, and the cosmos divided would not survive what he saw. What is to come? Now you might ask, what exactly did the jailer see? What is coming, and why did he not just openly discuss this with the other Eternal Ones? Or has he perhaps done so, and did they just never tell us? Who knows? Again, those are some really good questions. Regardless, Zoval decides to take action, and strikes out at his fellow Eternal Ones to take their sigils, open up a path to Zereth Mortis to get to the sepulchre of the First Ones. In there, he would find the power to rewrite the rules of the universe. And the others, they didn't take kindly to that. Under the leadership of the Primus, they managed to overpower Zoval, strip him of his Arbiter powers, which they used to make a new, more robotic Arbiter, while Zoval was locked away within the Maw. Upon his body, they placed domination magic, a creation of the Primus to contain their brother. Over time, Zovaal managed to turn these chains into a weapon, and he became not just a prisoner, but also the Lord of the Maw. Hell-bent on breaking free and fulfilling his quest, he got to work, and from there on out, he pretty much caused the story of Warcraft to happen, manipulating events so that it would all come together in his liberation and reaching that sepulchre. That might seem like an impossible task. After all, who could predict years and years and years of events? Well, it seems like they've given him similar powers of prediction as they did with the first ones. A good example that comes from the Sylvanas novel. As he's working together on his team, he makes some predictions. He predicts some events that are to come. A fiery darkness will return, which is the Burning Legion attacking Azeroth, but a prediction vague enough to apply to multiple things. Then he says, "You must step out of the shadows and lead," which were the words that Vol'jin spoke to Sylvanas. Impressive that he was able to foresee Vol'jin's death, but then again, assassinations, they're not hard to plan, and the words, they were whispered to Vol'jin by Muzala. But then he goes on to say, "A blade will pierce the heart of the world, and you shall hold the blood from that wound and sense its power." He is talking about the ending of Legion, in which the Dark Titan Sargeras stabbed Azeroth, wounded the world greatly, eventually have the world race for all that delicious, powerful Azerite. He's very specific in his prediction as well. Sargeras did not slice the world in half, did not destroy it, even though he tried. He really wanted to destroy it, but he only managed to stab it and was pulled back just in time. A prediction like that, all the little events that had to happen, the timing to precisely have that sword stuck in the planet, that, in my opinion, is way too specific to just be a random stab in the dark, or like to comparable to the Whispers of Il'gynoth, something that you could apply to many different situations. So, how does one defeat an enemy that's able to predict the future like that? Again, a really good question.
This place is of no consequence. The sepulchre will soon be within reach. Mossworn, come.
Either way, seemingly with the power to predict events that have not yet come to pass, our boy Zovaal, he goes to work, recruiting allies to move his pieces across the board. Most prominently, there was Sire Denethrius and his creation, the Dreadlords, as we know them. They will play a critical role with infiltrating different cosmic domains and cause a whole bunch of trouble. For example, they caused havoc in the domain of order by stoking the Mad Titan's fear of the void. The fear that pushed Sargeras into forming his demonic Burning Legion and scour the universe of its dark corruption. Meaning that any story which originally had the Burning Legion at its source has now added the Jailer to its tail end. Then, as Sargeras was raging at how long it took for his fallen demons to wake in the twisting nether, it was again the Dreadlords that told him that they could forge a resurrection engine that would make his armies rise again in an instant. All they required was the necessary fuel, the soul of a world infused with the power of death. So it was that Sargeras enslaved the world soul Argus, and the Dreadlords went to work.
A world soul twisted by death. A maw with which to crush the Arbiter. And now, it shall take this vessel. Argus will be eternal.
Normally, the Shadowlands are reserved for mortal souls, and beings like the Titans, they're supposed to go elsewhere. However, pumping it full of death magics, it made it so that millennia later, when we showed up and defeated Argus, its soul actually shot off into the Shadowlands. That big influx of a titanic soul, it was way too much for the Arbiter to handle. It broke down, and then all the souls instantly flowed down into the Maw, which fueled the Jailer's plans. Denethrius was not his only ally either, far from it. We've seen Helya, Muzala, Devils, the Valkyr, and of course Sylvanas Windrunner. By the time that she threw herself on the top of Icecrown after claiming vengeance upon Arthas, she ended up in the Maw, in the Jailer's domain, and suffered eternal torment. It was by his command that she was given a moment to rest, a moment in which they talked with each other. He wanted her to join his side, but not as a slave or a servant. He wanted her as a partner, or at least that's the story he told her. The motivation used to join his side, it's a little bit mixed, and it seems like he just threw whatever he could at her to make her join his side. For example, part of it was the choice of either working with him or simply suffering more torment. Part of it was agreeing to the idea that the designs of the first ones, that the bullshit. And part of it, a big part of it, was that the sorting of the afterlife, it was done indiscriminately and without taking into account the bonds we forged in life. Meaning that someone like Windrunner, even if she wasn't sorted into the maw, she could still be sorted into an afterlife away from the rest of her departed family. She could be away from her sisters, from her brother Lirav, and a lot of people wondered where someone like Duratan, Draka's mate and Thrall's father was hanging out. This seems to be playing into that idea, the separation of the Shadowlands being a reason to tear it all down.
We're breaking a system that has always been flawed and remaking it into one that is just.
All in all, the Sylvanas novel, it does its best to sell the idea of Sylvanas working together with the jailer, with the one responsible for the Lich King. It would have been great if they actually explained that motivation also in the game. Now even the jailer's motivations, going against his creator's design, the idea of no choice in life, they're not without merit. One could wonder if the jailer was actually right, but ultimately, as Enduin puts it best, his motives, they might have been right, but his methods certainly weren't.
Look around you! At what and who you've joined. What makes you believe you're not just a weapon to achieve his ends?
Which is perhaps why it's so odd that after all is said and done, after all of the jailer's plans came together and, of course, ultimately failed, after we closed the book on his story and supposedly like 20 years of storytelling of Warcraft, that ultimately nothing in the Shadowlands or the grand design has really changed. We see Pelagos replacing the Broken Arbiter with a mindset of souls that need a chance at redemption rather than be sent off straight into the maw, which is definitely nice, but it doesn't touch on the whole pattern of the first ones, nor the unfairness of life, or the separation of loved ones, or being put to work in the afterlife. As a final note, here's some information from Firim. It's a broker that has done extensive research into Zereth Mortis and the first ones. Though the jailer's been defeated and the Shadowlands made whole again, I find myself unable to celebrate these victories, for I have studied the inner workings of the Sepulchre, seen the powers with which the jailer sought to remake reality, and these observations fill me with a fear that shakes the very core of my being. It is clear to me now that there must be a Zereth for each force of the cosmos, and within them an inner sanctum akin to the Sepulchre. And if that is true, then these sanctums must be connected on some fundamental level. A connection that the jailer sought to exploit. What he began in the Sepulchre was meant to cascade outwards from one Zereth to the next, until all were dominated by his power. The heart of the Shadowlands, acting as a doorway to the heart of each cosmic force in turn, one after another, bound to his will. But if his scheme was thwarted, then why is my mind so ill at ease? Because I've seen how fragile the pattern is. How delicate the scales that keep the six forces in balance. And if the jailer, in his act of malevolence, left behind but the most imperceptible of cracks in the pattern, then I fear what is tiny now will only grow, until the balance itself is prone to be shattered by another force, applying relentless pressure. I pray that the first ones anticipated such an eventuality, that they would leave measures in place to preserve their grand design. Unless their design was never meant to endure. And that is the possibility that haunts me.
Do you see the patterns? The fractals? I'm so close to understanding. Oh, hello.
Everything, it just kinda goes back the way that we found it. We closed the door behind us, and now we're gonna focus on dragons again, which at the end of the day, it might just be for the best. Hello everyone! Last stream, I got this question from Batiladin. Noble, with the new expansion going on in the Elven lands, do you think we might see a return of Kifix? I mean, Xal'atath sucked up Zakash in Tyr's tomb in Tirisfal. Can he somehow be a part of Xal'atath and want to resurrect his brother? And I thought that this was a pretty darn good question. Let's make a video about it. But I can understand that what I just said for some of you sounds like abracadabra. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Well, in the past, Xal'atath, while still trapped in the Blade, she's been quite active and has been pulling strings behind the scenes. One of those involved an ancient evil released due to the darkness at Ulduar. Here, we found the imprisoned old god Yogg-Saron doing his very best to break free, manipulate his jailers, and take over the facility. Eventually, managing to get his corrupting tentacles into Keeper Loken, and use him to nullify the other keepers. Meanwhile, Keeper Tyr, Arcadis, and Ironaya, they figured out what was going on. And while they didn't have the forces or the opportunity to clean up the prison, they could take the discs of Norgannon, which have been recording Azeroth's true history since the coming of the Titans, and when their creators would eventually return, they would have proof of Loken's betrayal. Quickly leaving Northrend behind them, their daring journey began, and Loken lost his mind, fearing above all that he be found out, that he be punished. So he released the ancient forces that had been locked away when the Titans brought order to Azeroth, the Kafraks, called Kifix and Zakash. They were sent off to Tyr and his party, and caught up to them in the area that we now call Tirisfal, because that is where Tyr fell, sacrificing it all so that his friends could journey on, so that the truth could be revealed. Zakash fell where Tyr fell, while Kafix, they managed to travel a little bit further, before also succumbing to their wounds. But that would far be the end of their stories, and all of it could very much be connected to the war within.
The world's soul, so long denied me, shall be mine.
Where Kafix had fallen, the Loa reeled from its presence, burying it beneath the earth so that no other creature would disturb it. It was the only place forbidden by the tribe's witch doctors and priests. The Loa warned the tribe's mystics of severe consequences should they disturb the Black Stones. For many years, none of the trolls dared disobey, but curiosity eventually won out. Curiosity and Zalata's influence. While in the dagger, she led the troll Zundo and his followers to this forbidden place, and convinced them that performing blood rituals would be a really good idea. Great power awaited them after all, enough to wipe out their rivals. With this in mind, corrupted by the blade, the witch doctor did not hesitate. He dismembered some of his companions with the dagger, and then he used their blood and organs as reagents to awaken Kifix once more. In the final act, Zundo buried his gore-stained dagger into Kifix's hide, and the giant rumbled to life. Zundo and his followers were never seen again. Trolls would later visit the site, and find only scattered bones picked clean of flesh. And our Kifix knew how to harness Zalata's true potential. Knew it would delight the imprisoned old gods to see this pitiful civilization rent to ashes. The Kafraks reached out with his mind and controlled the buck race of the Akir to wipe out the trolls. But the trolls were powerful, and the trolls were many. Under leadership of the Zandalari, and at great costs, they managed to fight back, destroy Kifix, defeat its armies, but Zalata would haunt the dreams of the war survivors until the end of their days. Many tribes would recount legends about the Black Blade that had nearly driven them to extinction. And where did Kifix fall? Oh, nowhere special, I suppose, except atop the sites where they'd kill him. The trolls established a brand new settlement. It would one day grow into a sprawling temple city, a little place you know as Zul-Aman. What could go wrong building up your settlements upon the corpse of a Kafrax? And that's only one of the first lineup of dominoes of events that cascade all the way into the war within. Fun facts, the Amani trolls living at Zul-Aman, they would end up in a war with the newly located High Elves of Quel'Thalas. The High Elves, in turn, teamed up with the recently formed Arathi Empire. Humans evolved from Vrykul, hit with a curse of flesh. A curse provided by the old god Yogg-Saron, which made them more vulnerable to the old god's influence, but also gave them flesh. The Vrykul of Northrend had been ordered to murder their malformed offspring, but the parents could not, and instead send their children to the lands legend said Tyr and the others had gone to. That's how the humans eventually ended up in these lands, and their union with the elves, it led not only to their victory in the so-called Troll Wars. And honestly, when you start to think about it, the ripple effect of this is kinda nutty. You got the formation of the Arathi Empire, those Arathi that were partying with in Hollowfall, but you also got the formation of the Alliance of Lordaeron, Illyria and Trillium meeting up, Lothar calling upon his ancient bloodline, introduction of magic to the humans. This moment in history is massive. But Thoradin of Arathor, leader and founder of the first human kingdom, he'd only just begun. He becomes super interested in the origin of humans, and legends of those days eventually led him to an ancient tomb.
Long ago, my yearning for knowledge led me here, to a tomb that lies beneath the lake. Within its cold stone walls, I found something long buried, a terrible darkness, an ancient evil. My men begged me to walk away. I refused. My pride would be my downfall, and theirs. The evil stirred, unleashing death upon us. With my last breath, I drove my blade, Stromka, into the beast's skull. For many ages, the sword has kept the beast from rising again. But now, it stirs once more.
Warriors during the Legion expansion would travel into the tomb first, taking on the beast and claiming Stromkar as their artifact in the war against the Burning Legion. Shadow Priests came in next, stopping the Twilight Hammer and overpowering Twilight Deacon Farding.
Yes, we are eager to feast on the fallen Titan's minions. But first, Zakash. The cultists may try to stir him again, or he could awaken on his own. We must consume his essence to ensure he is gone forever. You know this must be done.
A nice little snack for our Zolotov, who would go on playing a vital role in the defeat of the Legion, getting herself out of that blade in battle for Azeroth, and now, of course, prominently featuring in the War Within. So to your question, when we go back to the old lands, as they said with the announcement for the World Soul Saga.
You will be returning, ready, to the old world. To the fabled lands of Quel'Thalas. There, the forces of the Void have invaded Azeroth, intent on snuffing out the light of the Sunwell and plunging the world into darkness and fear. You will not only help reunify the scattered elven tribes of Azeroth, but you will make your stand with the forces of the light and banish the shadow forever.
I'd imagine that this history with the Kafraks, Kifix underneath Zulaman, that it will come back into play in some way, some form. If not, then Blizzard is, in my mind, letting an easy connection fall away, and it's not like they've forgotten about Xalata's influence on the past. Quite the opposite. They've been very clear and wanted to let us know what Xalata has done. If we go back to the War Within pre-events, then we can literally see previous wielders of the Blade of the Black Empire. The image of Zondo is there, but also Modgut, great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma of Dagran Faurusan, who also got abandoned by the Blade. Her final words being, "You promised." But before she fell, Modgut released such darkness upon Grimbatol while wielding Xalatath as she was fighting in the War of Three Hammers, that those stuck inside would eventually become corrupted and turned into the Skardin. Originally, the Skardin didn't show up in the corrupted Grimbatol. We didn't see them in-game, but they made sure to incorporate them and give them a model during the War Within. Point being that those events from the past, they most definitely play a part in Xalata's plans for the future. She nearly made a whole army of Skardin by infecting the machines of the Ringing Deeps. Now obviously, the connection is quickly made to someone like the Jailer, who also retroactively has been given a whole lot of credit for manipulating events in the past. But what I like with Xalata, and what I find a major difference so far, is that it's not the entire thing. It's not the entire history being thrown upon her shoulders. Instead, it's more critical, smaller moments that cascade into her favor, as well as it's built up over a much longer period of time. From the moment that she was introduced as an artifact back in Legion, which is a couple of expansions ago now, it's been built up, and she's been whispering as she's been telling her story and been getting pieces of the puzzle that fit together. The more that we learn about her, the more mystery is also built up. I do really hope that we're gonna have those answers soon. We still have loads that we do not know about Zolotow, but going back to those wielders, we have the trolls with Zulaman and the Kafraks, right? We have Modgut with the Skardin, but there was one more mentioned in the artifact scrolls, one more image of a wielder that showed up. There was Natalie Celine, and I'm not sure how she would fit in with the overarching plans. We know that Celine is at the foundation of the Cult of Forgotten Shadows, which is severely underrepresented part of the lore within the game. Decades after Modgut lost Zolotow, the blade was taken by a human bishop named Natalie Celine. She had lived through the First War, when the Orcish horde invaded Azeroth and conquered Stormwind. After the war, Celine realized that to defeat the green-skinned orcs, humanity would need to study the strange powers they wielded. She closely examined their magics, and she visited battle sites where their dark arts had befouled the lands. From her investigations, she learned of an otherworldly blade that the orcs had used in their bloody rituals, a blade that held sway over the shadows themselves. Troubled that such a profane weapon could exist, Celine swore to hunt it down and destroy it in the name of the light. But the moment she touched the blade, she got into contact with Zolotow, who showed her that there was not just light, there was also a void. In the ebb and flow between these two forces, one can find power and knowledge beyond anything the Church of the Holy Light has ever revealed to us. One can cross the divide between light and void. One can pull strands from each side and weave a tapestry of day and night. Of course, there are consequences. There always are when walking in the shadows.
Embrace the shadow.
In essence, she brought us Shadow Priest. So from that, you could argue that Celine's research, it provided more cultists and potential victims falling to the whispers of the void. Yet, it also created a whole bunch of enemies wielding their powers against them. There's also this little thing that I do hope they still remember. There is Alonzus Fall, the one who put us on the quest to pick up Zolotow to begin with. In life, he too was a member of the Church of the Holy Light. In fact, he was Archbishop at the time. He saw the death of the clerics at Northshire at the hands of the orcs, and he proposed the idea of adding paladins amongst the ranks of the Alliance. It's thanks to him that we see legends like Uther the Lightbringer or Trellian turn the tide of battle against the Horde's Death Knights. At some point, however, some way, somehow, he would fall and be brought back into undeath, introducing himself with,
I am Alonzus Fowl. At times, I have been a leader of a church, a mindless minion of the Scourge, and a commander in a secret war. But I have always been a priest first.
Is there a scenario we could imagine in which Celine, member of the church, would confide in Alonzus about Zolotow? There's a fairly big gap in Fall's history. What secret war has he been a part of? Was it random chance that the Bishops of Secrets put us on a trail of finding the artifacts, or was this too part of the plan? Now, we've already done a full video on the Dark Heart and its role throughout history, but safe to say, long story short, Zolotow has had her whispers influence history on Azeroth for a very long time, and I don't think it's crazy to think that the dealings with the Kafraks, the events at Zulaman, the Trolls, Raffi, and the Elves, that they could all be part in the future, but only time is going to tell. And as we all know, any expansion that features the Trolls is going to be one hell of an expansion, so I can't wait to find out.
And as I was editing this video, more ideas popped to mind, more thoughts randomly. So we learned from Celine that the orcs also wielded Zolotow as she was in the blade. When exactly did that happen? When did they find Zolotow? Did she leave the planet? We have a Locust Walker that knows about Zolotow. That's like, oh, she calls herself the Harbinger now. That makes sense. She is connected to being this entity that used to serve Dimensius, the All-Devouring. So how come she ended up on Azeroth, ended up trapped in the blade?
We know that there was a bargain between herself and N'Zoth, a bargain which set her free from the blade. But what exactly did it provide N'Zoth, and how did they get in touch with each other? How did those parts play out in which she showed up in front of N'Zoth and was like, okay, you can set me free now? What did she manipulate there? In Hollowfall, as she is draining the crystal, Beladar, she has a whole speech about how she survived empires of the past. And yet, when we look at where she's standing at that moment, the design is very similar to the Darkheart itself, and the location as well, almost as if that was predetermined, that when the Arathi were there, something pushed them in order to set up their holy place, so that in the future, Zolotov had like this location to drain it again. There are a lot of intricate little bits and pieces that are being built up as to, okay, this is what Zolotov has done in the past. And again, the comparison, like, I remember once upon a time, someone asked me, like, could the jailer have done better? Could the jailer have been done in such a way that was accepted in the story? And back then, I was very strongly of the opinion, like, nah, adding something after the fact to the story that you've established is not going to work out. But over time, I've changed my mind on that one, as, you know, you can retroactively fit your story to fit a new narrative and make it better. Just look at the Illidan storyline, for example. And in the case of Zolotov, as I mentioned in this video as well, so far she has been given credit for everything, which is already a big advantage. And again, she's been given bits and pieces that work into her favor. Now, there is most definitely the potential of giving her too much power. And in my mind, that line is crossed when she can predict the future, right? Like when she can predict millennia in advance and that all these steps are going to happen. But so far, you can write off her predictions, her motivations, her manipulations as something that fits a narrative of, okay, she's just making use of opportunities, she is going with what's happening, and of course, she is whispering, she's manipulating, very much like the ring in Lord of the Rings, but that's what something that Zolotov has always been since the beginning with the dagger, where the priest picked it up a legion, she started whispering about the glory of the Black Empire, and how the Titans are nothing, and the dragons have fallen, and you should totally make fun of Keeper Odin, because he'll smite you, and that's going to be hilarious. And I kind of like that when it comes to her character. So once again, thank you very much for your question. I also realized that I never answered the whole bringing back her brother and becoming one being. Maybe. Like the intricate details as to what she's going to do with the Kafrax, that's something to be decided in the future. But again, if they don't bring in Zuluman and the Kafrax in the storyline in some way, shape, or form, as we're going to go back to the Quel'Thalas, to the Elvenlands, I would be highly surprised. Ramble at the end of the video, over. Hello everyone! I've been asked to do a video on what Sylvanas is doing now, and attaching to that, where do I think they want to take Sylvanas next?
Below lies the Maw, an unjust fate to which you doomed so many. And it will be there that your penance begins. Every soul lost in its depths, betrayed or condemned, you shall find and send forth to the Arbiter, to be judged with the compassion all souls deserve. You will toil there, under Dorotha's watchful eye, scouring every darkened reach, until the final soul is free, and you are all that remains. This is how you shall bring renewal to your victims and my people.
However long it takes, it shall be done.
Sylvanas is currently spending her time in the Maw, Warcraft's version of Hell, in which time doesn't exactly work the same as it does in our reality. The Maw can feel eternal, while on the outside only a few years might have passed. Time is orderly, so for the Windrunner, it probably feels like she's been down there a whole lot longer than she's actually been for us, spending her time sending tormented souls back up to the Arbiter for judgment. One by one, these just or unjust souls that have been sent down here, they go back up to have another look at their case, and this is for two reasons. One is that normally the souls would have been judged upon their actions in life, to determine what realm of the Shadowlands they were supposed to go to. But that system got broken at the end of Legion. The Dreadlords had been corrupting the soul of Argus, pumping it full with death magic. Normally, this heightened spirit was supposed to go elsewhere, presumably the domain of Order, but with the Dreadlord's actions, it changed, and it shot off into the Shadowlands, overloading the Arbiter and shutting down this whole process of judgments. Now all souls, and when we say all souls, we're not just talking about Azeroth. All souls, young children, old grandparents, soldiers, farmers, any creature that was supposed to go to the Shadowlands, it now gets sent straight down into Hell. A realm of eternal torment, with their spirits being pulled apart, devoured, reshaped, tormented, for all those that did not deserve even a moment of it. A big issue, since the Kyrians didn't stop ferrying souls, even with the system broken down. They just kept on delivering souls to Oribos, causing them all to instantly fall down into the maw, which added to the jailer's powers and his eventual escape, meaning that thousands, millions, billions of souls unjustly ended up in Hell, and those are now, one by one, manually being sent back up by Sylvanas so that she can do her atonement. So that the souls can be rejudged, as that brings us to the second reason. We have replaced the broken Arbiter with a new one. Pelagos now holds the seat, and they believe that nobody deserves the treatment of the Maw. It is a domain for the truly irredeemable. But is there such a thing? With enough time and treatment, could not all souls be redeemed? Perhaps. Time to find out. So, while in the past, souls were sent to the Maw, but rarely, and then the machine got broken, so all of them went down here, now Pelagos is going to send none. Which means that at some point, Sylvanas is going to be left all alone. Once her sentence has been served, once she gets around to all those poor souls still waiting while being tormented, the Maw is going to be emptied out. Only its natural denizens like the Maw Rats will remain behind, and as Tyrande said,
until the final soul is free, and you are all that remains.
Well, not entirely alone, I suppose. Keen-eyed observers already spotted a familiar soul which has been silent, following Sylvanas and then departs, only to return again later. Is this the champion of the Banshee Queen, still keeping an eye on his beloved? She held his heart in life, a connection that not even the Shroud of Death could diminish, a powerful tool for the jailer to manipulate.
Where is she?
With him, of course. In the darkest place. Along with every soul burned to ash in your precious tree.
Where is she?
Go on. Kill me. You'll send me right to my lady. Beyond the veil, she's shattered. Oh, Tyrande. High Priestess. Night Warrior. Completely powerless to stop the coming.
Night Warrior. I expected more.
I will take your head, Banshee! Just like I took his!
You didn't know. Your master is keeping secrets from you.
Presumably, the jailer, for some reason, kept Naphanos separate from Sylvanas. Perhaps he thought their feelings for each other would complicate their plans, or perhaps he thought to use Naphanos in case she decided to go against him before he got his powers back. Who is to say? It didn't come into play, and now the jailer is gone. Sylvanas is serving a sentence, and Naphanos might be nearby. So where does that leave us going forward? What will they possibly do with the Banshee Queen? And of course, the future is unwritten. It's anyone's guess, and I've heard pretty much every opinion, between just having her vaporized in the maw, to returning as a full-blown leader of the Forsaken, and anything in between. Everyone will have their own opinions on this one. Mine is that they have certainly written themselves in quite a corner. To me, the Banshee Queen was always a character that did whatever needed to be done to bring the mission to a success. arrows in her quiver, fired on the battlefield to bring the enemy down, developing a plague that could and did do massive damage to the living and undead alike, sharing the undead curse with now her own Valkyr, sacrificing family members to empower her champion, declare war on the world, on the universe, if it meant the destruction of an unjust system like the Shadowlands. To me, the Banshee Queen was ruthless, the darker shadow within the Horde that did not concern itself with morality, fitting for an undead race which is trying to hold its ground in the world of the living. A world that houses organizations like the Scarlet Crusade, but also shoots down simple messengers asking for an alliance. However, with that in mind, there were certain limits that I imagined the Banshee Queen to uphold. Limits like working with the source behind the Lich King. Her character and the Forsaken in tow, they were so defined by claiming vengeance upon Arthas. Imagine how she would feel towards the one that was responsible for him. And she was not unaware of the jailer's involvement either. He openly explained to her what his role had been. The character of Sylvanas that I knew would have done everything in her power to work against the jailer, which, if you ask me, should have been her role during the Shadowlands. Instead of Bolvar being butchered, have the Banshee Queen turn around and lead the charge into the domain of death. What happens in life doesn't matter when the afterlife is messed up. You've seen what I have seen.
Follow me.
And I will set us all free.
But that's not the story we got. Or limits to her character, like doing to others what Arthas did to her. Which, for me, is the breaking point when it comes to the character of Sylvanas. Up to this moment, even with a burning of Teldrassil, Derek Proudmoore, Bane, all the other things that happened during her time. For me, up to this moment, they could have still turned the car around, have her make a different decision, rise up against the jailer, and somewhat remain workable.
Enough! Submit. You are only making this harder on yourself.
Not harder on me. Right now, you hold all the power. How will you use it?
I've not come this far to falter now.
Then why do you hesitate? Make your choice, Sylvanas Windrunner.
By making the choice to turn Anduin into a mindless slave to the jailer, she became the very thing that she was always against. What Arthas did to her, she now did to Anduin, and I genuinely wonder if their original plan was to have Sylvanas be killed off in the raid. The story definitely seems to be going towards it, but then there are also cutscenes and voice acting that follow this moment, which must have been planned months in advance, so I don't know. What I do know is that this would not be the end of Sylvanas. And now we're gonna go into the thick of things, because, well, for Shadowlands, they introduced the idea that a Mournblade, like Frostmourne, when wielded with rage, can sometimes shatter a soul into fragments. Take away a piece of it, like we've seen with Uther the Lightbringer, but also something added to Sylvanas' story. When she was struck down by Arthas, he took away a piece of her soul, which some way, somehow ended up in the hands of the jailer. Is that the reason why she ended up in the maw when she threw herself off of Icecrown? Maybe, but as far as I know, not confirmed. Is that the reason why she did all the things she did? And now that her soul is complete again, we can't judge her for her previous actions? Not really. And yet, I have seen this used as a point so that we can't judge Sylvanas for what happened. I think that is being leaned into, yet at the same time, they also don't want to take away Sylvanas' agency.
The way is open, Zovor! We already have what we need!
Too long I endured the Maker's flawed design. I will forge a new reality, where all shall serve.
I will never serve.
There can be no true justice without compassion. And I can see your deeds bear the mark of the jailer's influence. An influence we failed to contain.
The jailer did not control me. My actions were mine alone, and I accept their consequences.
One of the things that I still like about the character is that this isn't used as an excuse for her actions. So, what is the point? What is the point of this inception, this return the piece of her soul that was lost? I don't think it's to give her an excuse. Rather, we have Ranger General Sylvanas judging Banshee Queen Sylvanas and realizing,
burn it! This was their home. And you slaughtered all of them! How could you take all those innocent lives? This was beyond life and death. There was no other path to true freedom. How can you not see that? I see what you are. Murderer! Monster! Butcher! Why can I not escape this torment?
The jailer has severed their bond and condemned her to endlessly relive her atrocities. So long as her soul remains divided, she cannot wake. Well met, Ranger General.
What is this? Who are you?
Someone who shared your fate, felled by the blade of the very same prince.
This. I died trying to stop that monster, only to wake up haunted by one with my face.
That Banshee is you.
No. I cannot accept that.
Her path began where yours ended, and you've seen the decisions she made.
Never in 1,000 lifetimes would I betray everything I stood for. You can't possibly understand.
The jailer is deceptively cunning. When I realized I had become his pawn, it nearly destroyed me. He had no doubts it would destroy you as well. Was he right? Or will you accept her shattered legacy and tell us how to stop him?
Her crimes are unforgivable.
Yes.
And she... Burn it! I must face the consequences.
We cannot change the past, and we may never find forgiveness in the future. But inaction damns us all. Time is short, Ranger General. Make your choice.
Yet, what does that mean going forward? What kind of character did Sylvanas become now? Is she the old Ranger General that we haven't seen since Warcraft 3? Is she still the Banshee Queen? Is she something in between? To be revealed if and when we party more with the Banshee Queen. At the very least, she holds agency over her choices. But then the question still remains, what next? What to do with Sylvanas? There are some building blocks in place, not just Arator traveling to the Maw to ask for her help. There's also this line by Venari back on Karesh.
Enough! Make sure he succeeds. I have been to the Maw. I know what the Void fears.
I'm sure you do.
A repeat of what the Windrunner comic suggested. There's something in there, something connected to the Maw. maybe domination magics, or maybe very specifically Sylvanas Windrunner, there's something that the Void fears there. And the Void is going to be one of our biggest problems to deal with in Midnight. Who better to pop her head out of the maw, roll up to save the day? But then what? Could we possibly see a World of Warcraft with Sylvanas Windrunner back in charge of the Forsaken? The Forsaken, who are currently being led by a council, the Desolate Council. And that council in turn is part of a bigger council called the Horde. Kalia Menethil has been built up as a parallel for Sylvanas Windrunner. We've got the Dark Lady versus the Pale Lady, with both having a champion, Navanos Blightcaller and Derek Proudmoore. I think that Kalia was meant to be Sylvanas' big replacement, offering the Forsaken a new way of reproducing and being brought back in the way of the light. But that's a big choice, having a Menethil to come in and rule the Forsaken. That requires a whole lot of story and build up to have any hope of succeeding, which I don't think they have. The response to Kalia that I've seen, it's not exactly been great, and now we got a council with more voices. We got Lillian at our side, and we got more voices than just Kalia Menethil, and yet, and this is something that goes beyond just the Forsaken, and yet, I do miss faction identity in the story of Warcraft. I miss the idea of, you're part of the Alliance, you're part of the Horde, but most importantly, a representation of what it means to be set race within the faction. If we're trying to answer the question on whether or not Sylvanas should be leading the Forsaken, perhaps we should first build up what it means to be a modern-day Forsaken. Their motivation was to claim vengeance upon Arthas, and then their motivation, it was their devotion and dedication to Sylvanas. But even while doing that, some wondered how long were they supposed to go on, replacing body parts too far decayed. How long until you've replaced so much that the original person, the original Forsaken is gone? What is their purpose? And for now, it seems to be a general loyalty to the Horde. But should there not be more to warrant an undead life of suffering? And again, not just a question for the Forsaken. I wonder across the board where the different races stand now. What does it mean to be a Goblin or a Worgen? Or how are the Pandaren holding up? Or the Dragfear as they learn more beyond the Dragon Isles? It's a bit off topic, but I do think it's relevant. Sylvanas is one of those old school leaders of the Horde, which used to have a very strong identity in World of Warcraft. And over time, to me, that's been watered down, that's been lost. Whether or not they're gonna pull an Illidan and bring back the Banshee Queen, or they'll just have her show up, be part of the Windrunners to save the day, or just keep it in the maw altogether, I'm curious to see where they want to take this next. But by all means, let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below, because it's a big topic, many different opinions, many different takes. This was just mine. Now you're up to speed as to what Sylvanas been up to. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed this one. And until next time, see ya!